called it a useless dream. She was not wrong. I just was not spending it on the right things yet.
The apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning, which meant it was not. Claire had moved the remote to the left side of the coffee table again, the way she always did when someone else had been sitting in my spot. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. I am an editor. You learn to see what has been moved. 24 hours at the office. My shirt smelled like the break room vending machine, 3 cups of bad coffee, and the particular staleness that builds in fluorescent light after midnight. My bag hit the floor by the door. I called Claire's name. Nothing. The silence had a texture to it. Not empty silence, full silence. The kind where someone is holding their breath on the other side of a wall. I had lived in this apartment for 2 years. I knew the sound of Claire watching television with the volume too low. I knew the sound of her sleeping past noon with the bedroom curtains drawn. This was neither. This was the sound of a room trying very hard to be empty when it was not. I called her name again. The syllable died somewhere near the hallway. The bedroom door was locked from the inside. That had never happened before. Not once in 2 years. Claire did not lock doors. She left them open, left drawers open, left the refrigerator cracked while she walked away to check her phone. Closing things was not part of her operating system. I knocked. The sound came back flat, absorbed by the cheap wood. Silence. Then voices. Low, urgent. The kind of whisper that only exists when 2 people are deciding what to do about a third. I sat down on the hallway floor, my back against the wall, knees up, hands on my knees. I did not kick the door in. I did not yell. I had waded through 1,000 bad manuscripts in my career, sat across from authors who refused to accept that their third act was broken. I had learned something from every one of those conversations. The truth comes out faster if you just sit still and let the room get uncomfortable. So I waited. The whispers behind the door got shorter, more urgent. Someone was putting on shoes. The lock turned. Colin opened the door. He saw me sitting on the floor and went white. Not embarrassed white, caught white. The color a man turns when the math he has been running in his head collapses. The safe window, the margin of error, the assumption I would be at the office until evening. All of it wrong. Claire appeared behind him, still fixing her hair. Her blouse was buttoned wrong, one hole off, all the way down. An editor notices that kind of thing. I looked at Colin, looked at Claire. I counted 4 seconds of silence. Not for drama, because my brain was doing something strange. It was filing this scene the way I filed a manuscript. Character, motivation, consequence. The protagonist discovers the betrayal. Classic inciting incident. I was editing my own life in real time, and the detachment should have scared me, but it did not. It just felt efficient. Get out of my apartment. Colin moved past me, the way you move past furniture. No eye contact, no apology. The front door opened and closed, and the sound of his footsteps faded down the corridor. Claire started to explain. Her mouth was open. Her hands were rising into the defensive position she always used when I asked why the credit card bill was higher than expected, and the first syllable of whatever justification she had assembled during those locked minutes was already forming. I stood up, walked past her, went into the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker. The machine hummed. Claire stood in the hallway with her hands still raised, explaining something to a man who had already left the conversation. Colin pulled out his phone before the elevator doors closed. His fingers moved fast, automatic, the way they always moved when he was managing situations at the office. It is done. He knows. He did not even yell. 3 dots pulsed on the screen. The reply arrived in 4 seconds. Good. That is easier than a scene. Colin pocketed the phone. He leaned against the mirrored wall and exhaled through his nose. He almost looked relieved, the way a man looks when the part of the job he was dreading turns out to be the simplest part. No yelling, no thrown objects, no scene in the hallway that the neighbors would remember. Just a man sitting on the floor, asking him to leave and leaving. He checked his hair in the mirror, adjusted his collar, smoothed the front of his shirt. By the time the doors opened on the ground floor, his face was already rearranged into something that could walk into a bar and order a drink without anyone guessing what he had just done. He stepped out into the lobby and did not look back. I did not sleep. The couch was too short for my frame, but I was not going back into that bedroom. Not tonight, maybe not ever. I lay with my feet hanging off the end and the television on mute, and I ran the arithmetic. 2 years of marriage. The apartment lease was in my name. The joint bank account held my salary, and nothing from Claire, because she had not worked a single day since we married. She said she was looking. She was always looking. The search never seemed to end and never seemed to produce results. And I had stopped asking about it sometime around month 8. because asking felt like fighting, and I was too tired to fight about one more thing after fighting all day at the office over comma placement and chapter structure. My mother's ring. I had given it to Claire on our first anniversary, a thin gold band with a single stone that my mother had worn for 30 years. I gave it because I thought it meant permanence. It did, just not the kind I intended. I made a list, not on paper, in my head, the lease, the bank accounts, the ring, a lawyer if she fought it, divorce paperwork, a new apartment, because staying in a place where the bedroom smelled like someone else's cologne was not something I was going to do. My job, which I still technically had for exactly as long as Colin decided not to make things complicated at the office. By 4 in the morning, the list was complete. Every item accounted for, every thread I would need to cut, cataloged, and sequenced. The television threw blue light across the ceiling in waves. I stared at it. The strange part was this. I was not sad. Sadness would come later, or it would not come at all. Right now, I was just precise. The way I got with a manuscript that needed a structural rewrite. You do not cry over a broken third act. You just open the file and fix it. Claire came back at 6 in the morning. I heard the key in the lock. I was still on the couch, still dressed. The coffee maker had run dry sometime around 3. She had clearly rehearsed. The speech came out in paragraphs, organized like a presentation. She had probably practiced it in front of a mirror somewhere, or maybe in Colin's bathroom, or maybe in her car in the parking garage downstairs, where she had sat for the past hour working up the nerve to come inside. The argument was structured, 3 parts. Part 1. I was emotionally unavailable. I worked overtime every single week. I came home at midnight and left at 7, and the apartment was just a place where I slept, and she was just the person who happened to be sleeping in the same room. Part 2. I had stopped being present in the marriage, not just physically. Something inside me had gone cold years ago, and she had tried to reach it and could not, and eventually she stopped trying. Part 3. I had a dream once, a real dream, writing novels. I had been good at it. I had published 3 books under a pen name before we met, and when Gerald, her father, told me to give it up and get a real job if I wanted to marry his daughter, I just did, like a good boy. And something in me died that day, and she had been living with the corpse of that ambition ever since. And maybe the affair was not about Colin at all, but about the fact that I had turned into a man who let other people decide what he was allowed to want. She said Gerald's name like it was evidence, like the fact that her own father had crushed my dream somehow explained why she ended up in our bed with my colleague. I listened to the whole thing, every word. I did not interrupt. I did not nod. I did not shake my head. I sat on the couch with my hands on my knees, and I gave her the same silence I give a manuscript that is trying very hard to be right. When she finished, her eyes were wet. She was waiting for me to say something that would make this a conversation instead of a verdict. I want a divorce. I will have the paperwork by Friday. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Friday, I repeated. Then I went to the kitchen to make more coffee. The pot was empty. I refilled it anyway. The sound of water running into the carafe was the only sound in the apartment for a very long time. The knock came at 10 that night. I was not expecting anyone. I had spent the day packing Claire's things into boxes and stacking them by the front door. Her clothes, her cosmetics, 3 pairs of shoes she never wore but refused to throw away. The decorative pillows she had insisted on buying for a couch I was now sleeping on. My back hurt. My eyes were sandpaper. I wanted to sleep for the first time in 2 days, and the universe apparently had other plans. I opened the door. 2 young women stood in the hallway, luggage at their feet. The blonde one had bright eyes and an energy that felt out of place in a building this quiet at this hour. Her smile looked like it had been assembled quickly for exactly this moment. The way you put on a presentation face before a meeting you are not sure you were invited to. The dark-haired one stood half a step behind her sister, looking at her shoes. Her fingers were white on the handle of her bag. The blonde one spoke first. "Are you Marcus, the editing teacher from the Clover Cram School 7 years ago?" I had taught at a cram school 7 years ago. Part-time work during my university years. I barely remembered any of their faces. Hundreds of students, most of them gone from my memory the day after the final class. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "You probably do not remember us, but you saved my life there." A pause. Something shifted behind her eyes, quick and deep, and then it was gone. We had nowhere else to go. The dark-haired one still had not looked up. Her knuckles tightened on the bag handle. She was shaking, very slightly, the kind of tremor you only see if you are standing close enough. I looked at them both, 2 strangers with luggage and a story I did not remember being part of. The blonde one's smile was holding, but just barely, like a seam that would split if I said the wrong word. The dark-haired one was one deep breath away from crying. I stepped back and opened the door wider. I did not know why. Maybe it was the bags. Maybe it was the way the dark-haired one's knuckles were white on that handle, the way her shoulders were pulled in like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. Or maybe I had just spent a night cataloging everything I had lost, and two people standing at my door who needed something from me was easier than being alone with the list. Amber walked in first. She looked around the apartment, took in the boxes stacked by the door, the empty shelves where Claire's things used to be, and said nothing about any of it. Norah followed. As she passed me, she whispered something. I think it was thank you, but it was so quiet it could have been anything. Her hand brushed my sleeve, and I felt the tremor. I closed the door behind them. The apartment was still a mess. The couch still had my blanket on it. The boxes were still stacked against the wall, but the silence was different now. It had people in it. 3 days later, the cafe on the corner of 3rd and Maple. Claire sat across from me with her lawyer beside her. She had dressed up for this, hair done, lipstick applied with the precision of someone going to war. The blouse she wore to her college reunion 2 years ago, the one she saved for occasions when she needed to look like she was winning. It was her armor, and I recognized every piece of it because I had complimented all of it at different points in our marriage, when I still thought compliments bought something real. Her lawyer placed a document on the table, 3 pages. Claire's revised version of our marriage, apparently. In this narrative, I had created a hostile home environment. I had been cold and withdrawn for months. I had driven her away through neglect. She was the victim. Colin was a mistake born of desperation, and she intended to contest the divorce and claim financial compensation for the emotional damage I had inflicted by, essentially, being too busy editing manuscripts to notice she was unhappy. I picked up the document, read all 3 pages. I am a fast reader. 2 minutes, tops. The lawyer watched me read. Claire watched me read. The cafe hummed around us. Someone 2 tables over was laughing about something. I put the document down. Before we continue, I said, I want to show you something. I looked over my shoulder at the counter. Amber was sitting there with a latte and her phone, looking like any other customer killing time on a weekday morning. She was not any other customer. She walked over, calm, no hurry, placed her phone on the table between Claire and me, pressed play. The video was 12 minutes long. It showed Colin entering our apartment at 11:40 in the morning on a Tuesday when I was supposed to be at the office until 6. Claire opened the door. She was smiling. Not the polite smile she gave neighbors, the real one. She pulled him inside by the hand. The footage had audio. You could hear her laugh. You could hear the door lock click shut. 3 hours and 42 minutes later, Colin left. Claire leaned against the doorframe and watched him go. She waved. She was still smiling. Claire's lawyer picked up the phone, watched the first 90 seconds, put it down, looked at Claire, looked at the 3-page document she had just presented, did not say a word. The math was doing itself in her head, and the sum was not good for her client. Claire's expression changed, not all at once, in layers. First, the performance dropped. The confident woman who had walked in here with a strategy crumbled at the edges. Then, the composure. Then the plan itself, the whole architecture of it, the hours she had spent constructing a version of events where she was the wronged party, gone. What was left underneath was a woman who had walked into this cafe expecting to win and realized she had already lost before the first word was spoken. Where did you get that? Her voice was flat, empty. Amber shrugged one shoulder. I film things. It is kind of my thing. Claire's lawyer excused herself, needed a moment. The polite version of, my client's case just died on video, and I need to recalculate whether this meeting is still billable. I slid the divorce papers across the table, not hers, mine. Sign. Claire stared at the papers. Her hands sat in her lap. She was very still, the kind of stillness that happens when someone is replaying the last 5 minutes in their head and trying to find the moment where it all went wrong. Marcus, her voice cracked on the second syllable. I made a mistake. You made a choice. It was not what you think. Colin said things. He said you did not care about me, that you would never notice. He told me you were checked out, that you had given up on everything, not just writing, but us too. And I believed him because she stopped, swallowed, because it felt true. I let the silence hold for 3 seconds. Then, sign the papers, Claire. Can we just talk? 5 minutes. That is all I am asking. We are talking. Sign. Her eyes were wet now, not performance tears, the real kind. The kind that show up when the script runs out and there is nothing left to say except the truth, which is worse. I thought I could make you angry. Her voice dropped to nearly nothing. I thought you would yell and we would fight, and somehow that would mean you still cared. But you sat on the floor. You made coffee. You did not even look at me. For one sentence, something in my chest moved. Not forgiveness, recognition. She was describing something real. The man who gave up writing and stopped fighting and let the apartment fill up with silence. That man was me. She was not wrong about all of it, but she was wrong about the part that mattered. Sign. She picked up the pen. Her hand moved across the page the way hands move when the body is on autopilot and the mind is somewhere else entirely. The signature was messy, uneven. Nothing like the clean loops she used on birthday cards. She put the pen down. She stood up, collected her bag, straightened her blouse, and then, because Clare could never leave without making sure the last word hung in the air behind her, she said, "You gave up everything for that job. Your dream, our marriage. You gave up writing because Gerald told you to. And now, you are giving up me for a piece of paper." She walked out. The cafe door swung shut behind her. I sat there. The divorce papers were still on the table. Her signature was still drying. She was not entirely wrong about the dream. Gerald had told me to stop writing novels if I wanted to marry his daughter. And I had stopped, like a good boy, because I thought the trade was worth it. A career for a marriage, a dream for stability. The trade was worth nothing. I knew that now. I folded the papers, put them inside my jacket, stood up. Amber was waiting on the sidewalk. Norah was beside her, holding 2 paper cups of something warm. She must have gone to the place across the street while the meeting was happening. Norah handed me one without a word. Black coffee, no sugar. She had figured out my order in 3 days of living with me. Clare never got it right in 2 years. I thought about that for exactly 1 second. Then I let it go. "I am going to need to find a new apartment," I said. Amber's face broke into a grin. "We can help. We are good at moving quickly." Norah said it without inflection, looking straight ahead down the street. I did not ask why they knew that. I did not ask about the luggage or the cram school or the 7 years between then and now. I did not ask why a girl I could not remember claimed I had saved her life, or why her sister shook when she crossed my threshold, or why both of them had appeared at my door on the exact night my world ended. Those answers would come, or they would not. Right now, the 3 of us were walking down a sidewalk in winter sunlight. The divorce papers were in my jacket. The coffee was hot. Norah's steps matched mine, steady and even. Amber was already pulling up her phone, scrolling through apartment listings, narrating each one out loud with the enthusiasm of someone who had decided this was going to work before anyone asked her opinion. I listened to both of them and said nothing and kept walking. The bare trees threw long shadows across the pavement. The air was cold and clean in a way that felt deliberate, like the city had rinsed itself overnight. The worst week of my life was behind me. Whatever came next, I was meeting it on my feet. The new place smelled like paint and floor cleaner. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a living room that could generously be called a room. It was half the square footage of the apartment I had shared with Clare. I loved it immediately. Amber carried in 2 boxes at once, one balanced on her hip, the other pressed against her chest. She had not asked which room was hers. She had already decided. "Second bedroom, Norah and I are taking it." She dropped the boxes and wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Unless you were planning to use it as an office. It is your room." She grinned. Not a surprised grin. A grin that said she had already hung imaginary curtains. Norah came through the door behind her, carrying a single bag with both hands, gripping the handle like she was afraid someone would take it. She looked at the bare walls, the empty kitchen counter, the window that faced a narrow side street. "It is close to the station," she said quietly. 12 minutes on foot, 7 to your school." Norah set her bag down and exhaled. It was the kind of exhale that had a week of held breath behind it. They moved like people who had been ready to leave somewhere for a long time. The boxes went in fast. No hesitation about where things went. Amber claimed the left side of the closet before I had even brought the futons upstairs. Norah lined up her notebooks on the shelf beside the window without measuring the space first. She already knew they would fit. I stood in the hallway with a box of kitchen utensils and watched 2 teenage girls unpack their lives in 11 minutes. They were not moving in. They had already moved in. The boxes were a formality. Claire's things had gone to a delivery service that morning. Clothes, cosmetics, the expensive furniture she had picked out. I let her keep it. I did not need a bed that reminded me of someone else sleeping in it. Walter's office was on the 3rd floor of a building that also housed a dentist and an accounting firm. The sign on the door said SR Bunko in plain black letters. No logo, no tagline. Inside, 3 desks, 2 bookshelves, and a submission pile that came up to my hip. Walter stood by the window with his hands in his pockets. He was the kind of man who looked like he had been born in a cardigan. Calm, slightly rumpled, the sort of face that made junior staff confide in him without knowing why. why. The previous senior editor left for a bigger house, he said. Better salary, better benefits. Corner office. I do not blame him. I looked at the submission pile. The salary here is about 30% less than what I was making. It is. He did not sell me on it. He did not list the advantages. He just stood there, hands still in his pockets, and let me look at the room. I walked over to the desk and picked up the top manuscript, read the first paragraph, put it down, picked up the next one, read 3 pages standing. The prose was rough, but the voice was real. Someone had written this with their hands shaking. I will take the job. Walter nodded like I had confirmed something he already knew. The first week was exactly what I needed. Quiet, focused. 3 manuscripts on my desk, a red pen, and no one standing behind me asking whether the quarterly targets would be met. Walter brought me coffee at 3 in the afternoon without asking. The office smelled like paper and ink instead of politics. I stayed late the first 4 nights. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The manuscripts were rough and real, and they needed someone who could see what they were trying to be. That was the job. That had always been the job. For the first time in months, I went home tired for the right reasons. Hugo was already 2 drinks in when I arrived. He was tall, handsome in the way that made bookstore employees straighten up when he walked in, and currently hunched over the bar like a man who had just received bad medical news. The Legend is dropping a new title in spring, he said, without looking up. I sat down and ordered a beer. Hugo was the second-ranked light novel author in the country. He had earned that spot through 5 years of relentless output, 3 award nominations, and the kind of work ethic that made other writers feel guilty. He was good. He knew he was good. And he was terrified. I have been writing the same opening chapter for 3 weeks. He turned his glass in his hands. Every time I read it back, I hear his voice instead of mine. Whose voice? The Legend's. Every sentence I write, I think, he would do this better. He would find the angle I am missing. He would make the reader feel something in the first paragraph that I cannot land until page 40. He took a long drink and set the glass down harder than he meant to. I am not asking for reassurance. I know you do not do that. I do not. Good, he almost smiled. That is why I like talking to you. Everyone else tells me I am brilliant. You just hand me the manuscript back with red ink on every page. I took a sip of my beer. Bring me the manuscript when it is done. Hugo looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slowly, and ordered another round. We sat in the kind of silence that only works between people who do not need to fill it. 3 weeks after I started at SR Bunko, a girl with white hair walked into the office. She was 17, school uniform under a long charcoal coat, leather manuscript folder tucked under one arm, posture like she had been taught to enter rooms by someone who entered boardrooms. Her hair was white, not platinum blonde, not silver, white, and her eyes were red, not contacts, the real thing. She looked like a character from one of the novels stacked on my desk, except she was standing in my office at noon on a Tuesday. You are Marcus. It was not a question. She was looking at me the way editors look at a first page they already know is good. Most people around here just call me that. Yes, I know. She set the manuscript folder on my desk. The leather was expensive. The kind of expensive that does not need a brand name because the leather itself is the brand. I am the author behind the pen name Kaida R. I nearly dropped my coffee. Kaida R was the best-selling light novel series of the past 2 years. 14 volumes, 3 anime adaptations rumored, a readership that crossed every demographic line the industry used to pretend existed. And the author behind it was a 17-year-old girl standing in a startup office that did not even have a proper reception desk. You are Kaida R. She tilted her head slightly. Is that a problem? It was not a problem. It was an earthquake. Eleanor sat down across from me without being invited. She did not ask if the chair was free. She moved it 2 inches to the left, aligned it with the desk edge, and sat with the kind of precision that suggested she had opinions about furniture placement. I am leaving my current publisher, she said. I will give you exclusive rights to my next novel. The condition is that you personally edit every page. I left my last publisher less than a month ago. I am not in what anyone would call a stable professional position. Her expression did not change. Good. Stable editors are boring. She reached into the manuscript folder and produced 3 pages of notes, handwritten, fountain pen, on paper that probably cost more than my desk. The notes were about me, my track record, 3 titles I had edited that went to second printing, a review I had written for a literary journal 6 years ago. You wrote this review when you were 23, she said, tapping the bottom page, about a debut novel that everyone else dismissed. You said the author had a voice that would take 10 years to mature and that a patient editor would be rewarded. That author was me. The room went quiet. That was your manuscript? The one your colleague threw in the rejection bin without reading past the first page. You pulled it out. She folded her hands on the table. You wrote a 2-page editorial letter to a 16-year-old girl you had never met, telling her what worked and what did not, and why she should keep writing. I memorized every word. I have the letter in a frame. I sat back in my chair. The world had just rearranged itself in a way I had not expected. So you came here because of a letter I wrote 6 years ago. I came here because you are the only editor in this industry who ever treated my work as if it deserved real attention. She paused. And because your taste has not declined, even after everything they did to you. I should have refused. I was one person at a startup with no marketing budget and a submission pile that weighed more than I did. Taking on the biggest name in light novels with nothing behind me but a desk and a red pen was professionally reckless. When do you want to start? She almost smiled. Almost. The corner of her mouth moved approximately 1 millimeter. Tomorrow. That same afternoon, Walter called me into his office. He was holding a fax. His hand was not shaking, but it was close. We received a capital investment this morning. He set the fax on the desk and slid it toward me. From K to Holdings. I looked at the number. Then I looked at it again. That is more than this office is worth. That is more than this building is worth. Walter sat down heavily. I have been running SR Bunko for 2 years. The largest single investment we ever received before today was from my wife's retirement fund. He paused. This is not that. Kaida Holdings. Eleanor's last name was Kaida. Her pen name was Kaida R. The investment had arrived the same morning she walked through our door. I filed the coincidence. I did not name it. I did not ask. An editor learns to see what has been moved, but a good editor also learns when not to point at it. Walter, yes? I think good things are going to keep happening for a while. He looked at me over the fax with the expression of a man who had stopped asking why the river was rising and had started building a boat instead. Colin had made 3 mistakes in one afternoon. The first was showing up at the Kaida estate without an appointment. He had come to pressure Eleanor's previous publisher into reclaiming her contract, and someone had given him the family address instead. He walked through the front gate like a man who had never been told no by a door. The second was his attitude. The property was immense. Old money carved into every stone, every trimmed hedge, every inch of the wall that surrounded it. Colin walked through it like he owned it. He touched the gatepost. He stepped on the garden border. He raised his voice at the intercom when no one answered immediately. The third mistake was Sam. Sam came around the corner of the main house like a shadow that had decided to become a wall. He was not tall. He was wide. Suit jacket stretched across shoulders that had been built for a different kind of work. His face was calm in the way a locked door is calm. No visitors. Sam's voice was flat. Miss Kaida does not accept uninvited guests. Colin tried to push past him. What happened next took about 4 seconds. Colin was on the ground. His arm was behind his back. Sam's knee was on his spine. Colin was making a sound that was not quite a word. I am an editor, Colin managed, from a major publishing house. You are on the ground, Sam replied. From the ground. The front door of the main house opened. Eleanor stepped out. She was not wearing the school uniform this time. A formal kimono, deep red, white hair, pinned up with a single jade clip. She looked like a painting that had decided to have an opinion about the man face down on her gravel path. I know who you are. Her voice was the temperature of the overcast sky. You are the man who rejected my first manuscript without reading past the title page. You are the man who seduced a married woman because it amused you. And you are the man who had the only editor who ever respected my work fired on a lie. Colin tried to lift his head. Sam adjusted. Eleanor crouched down. Not all the way. Just enough that Colin could see her red eyes looking at his from 18 inches away. My grandfather runs the Kaida Group. Shipping, real estate, finance, media. She paused to let the list settle, including the media company that owns your publisher's parent corporation. Colin's face changed, not slowly. You came to my home to negotiate. She stood back up. There is no negotiation. You have lost everything you came here for, and in approximately 1 week, you will discover that you have lost several things you did not know you had. She turned and walked back inside. The door closed with the quiet finality of a verdict. Sam released Colin's arm. Colin scrambled to his feet, jacket torn at the shoulder, gravel embedded in his palms. He pulled out his phone and dialed the police. The call connected. Then it disconnected. He tried again. Same result. He tried a third time. Sam was still standing there. The Kaida Group is a generous supporter of public safety initiatives, Sam said. Generous supporters tend to have responsive relationships with public institutions. Colin looked at his phone, then at Sam, then at the closed door. Then he left. Not walked, left. The kind of leaving that does not involve looking back. Diane closed her office door and stood behind her desk with both palms flat on the surface. The phone call had lasted 4 minutes. Eleanor had left for SR Bunko. The Kaida investment had gone with her. 3 other authors had submitted transfer requests that morning, each citing editorial concerns that had never never been mentioned before Marcus left. She had his personnel file open on her desk. She had been considering an offer to lure him back. The file showed his track record in clean, irrefutable numbers. Titles edited, print runs, reprint rates, author retention. Every metric she had ignored when Colin told her Marcus was the problem. She closed the file. She opened it again. She closed it again. On the corkboard behind her, 5 novels were pinned with red flags, delayed. All 5 had been on schedule when Marcus was handling them. Colin had taken over the workload and promptly dropped every ball she did not personally place in his hand. Her phone rang. The department head, authors leaving, the president under investigation. A forensic audit triggered by a complaint filed through channels so high the company's legal team had not known those channels existed. Diane hung up and stared at the wall. She had fired the wrong man. She had believed Colin because Colin was convenient to believe. And now the building was on fire, and the man who could have stopped it was across town, editing manuscripts at a desk that probably did not even have a proper chair. Amber had dinner ready when I got home. Ginger pork, rice, miso soup, and a small salad that she had arranged on the plate like she was being graded on presentation. "You are late," she said from the kitchen doorway. "I was working." "You are always working. That is not an excuse. That is a pattern." Norah was already seated at the table. She had her textbook open beside her plate, which meant she had been studying until the moment I walked in. "How was work?" Norah asked. "A 17-year-old genius walked into my office and told me she is leaving the biggest publisher in the country to work with me specifically." Amber's head appeared around the kitchen doorframe. "Is she pretty?" "She has white hair and red eyes, so yes." Amber came back with the rice cooker. "Do I need to start worrying?" "You do not need to start worrying. That is exactly what someone would say if I needed to start worrying." She set the cooker down and slid into her chair. "Eat. You have been living on convenience store onigiri, and I can tell." I ate. The ginger pork was better than anything Clare had ever made, which was not a high bar, but Amber was not competing with Clare. She was competing with professional chefs, and she was not losing. Norah closed her textbook and joined the meal properly. The 3 of us ate in the kind of quiet that happens when nobody at the table needs to perform. No complaints about the day, no passive-aggressive silences, just food, warmth, and the sound of someone saying "pass the soy sauce." After dinner, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and my laptop open, reading the first chapter of Eleanor's new manuscript. It was good. It was very good. The prose had the same raw energy I remembered from 6 years ago, except now it had control behind it. She had not just matured, she had weaponized her voice. Amber sat behind me on the couch, her feet beside my shoulder, scrolling through her phone. "You are smiling," she said. "I am reading." "You are smiling while reading. That has not happened since we moved in." I did not correct her. She was right. Something had shifted. The ground under my feet was not steady yet, but it was there. For the first time in weeks, I was building something instead of cleaning up after something. The salary was 30% less, and the office did not have a reception desk, and the submission pile weighed more than I did. It was going well, which I did not quite trust yet. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Claire's name appeared in a gossip column. An unnamed source had connected her to the plagiarism whisper circulating about Colin, suggesting she had cooperated with investigators to deflect attention from her own conduct during the marriage. The story was small, a paragraph in an industry blog that most people would scroll past, but Claire's social circle did not scroll past. Her phone went quiet in a way phones are not supposed to go quiet. Friends who had texted every day stopped texting. The lunch invitations disappeared. A woman she had known since university unfollowed her on every platform in a single afternoon. She called me twice. I did not answer. I saw her name on the screen both times. I let it ring, not with satisfaction, not with anger, with the flat precision of an editor noting that the manuscript's problem had resolved itself. Clare was living in a net cafe by then. The apartment had been too expensive without a second income, and the money from selling my furniture had run out faster than she expected. She had applied to 3 jobs that week. 2 never responded. The 3rd asked for a reference she could not provide. I put my phone face down on the desk and went back to Eleanor's manuscript. Some problems do not need to be solved. They just need to be left alone long enough to finish what they started. Eleanor stood in my doorway holding a leather manuscript folder like a shield. "I need to understand your editorial environment," she said. "The office tells me how you work. The home tells me why." She was wearing a white sundress and a straw hat that she removed precisely 2 seconds after stepping inside, folding it against her chest. She looked like she had spent 3 days deciding what to wear, and then chose the outfit that said she had not thought about it at all. I let her in. She scanned the apartment the way I scanned opening paragraphs. Fast, thorough, already forming conclusions. "Small," she said, Efficient. The bookshelves are organized by publisher imprint, not by author. She tilted her head. You are the only person I have met who does that. Habit. She moved past the living room in 4 steps and stopped at the kitchen doorway. Her eyes landed on the apron hanging from the hook, the rice cooker still warm, the stack of mismatched plates that Amber had picked up from 3 different discount shops. Someone cooks here, Eleanor said, not a question. Before I could answer, Amber came around the corner with a glass of iced barley tea in each hand. She was barefoot, her blonde hair loose, wearing the oversized apron she had claimed the first week. She looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at her. The apartment got about 4 degrees colder. You must be the author. Amber set one glass on the table without breaking eye contact. He talks about your manuscript. Never mentioned you were this young. 17. Eleanor accepted the glass with both hands and the slightest dip of her head. And you must be the waitress from the cafe. You serve iced coffee with your left hand. Uncommon. Suggests ambidexterity or a corrected dominant hand. Amber blinked once. I am left-handed. I see. Norah appeared from the hallway with a textbook under her arm. She sat at the table, opened the book beside her plate, and watched the exchange with the quiet attention of someone keeping score. Eleanor evaluated them both in under a minute. I could see it happening. Amber's cafe worker posture, the way she moved through the kitchen without checking where things were. Norah's reading stack on the shelf, the creased spine of a veterinary science textbook, 3 levels above her grade. The younger one manages the household, Eleanor said, looking at me. The older one is studying material she has no academic reason to study, which means she is either bored or searching. You have given them structure without giving them rules. Interesting approach. Amber set down a plate of sliced watermelon harder than necessary. We are right here. I am aware. Then maybe talk to us instead of about us. Eleanor turned to Amber with an expression that was almost a smile. Almost. Fair, she said. I sat back and watched. Nobody in my apartment was deferring to anybody else. 3 months ago, the only sound in this place had been Claire's television shows playing to an empty room. Now 2 teenagers and a 17-year-old heiress were squaring off over watermelon, and the strange part was how normal it felt. Eleanor stayed for 2 hours. She and Amber did not become friends. They became something more useful. They became people who understood exactly where the other one stood. After Eleanor left, the apartment settled back into its usual rhythm. Amber washed the dishes. Norah dried. I sat at the table reviewing Eleanor's manuscript corrections with a red pen, and for about 20 minutes, the only sounds were water running, pages turning, and the occasional clink of a plate being stacked. Amber broke the quiet. Our sublet is gone. She said it the way she said everything difficult, directly, while doing something else. Her hands kept moving under the water. The landlord sold the building. We got the notice last week. I looked up from the manuscript. Norah set down the dish towel. She was gripping it with both hands. We cannot go back to our old home. Her voice was steady, but the towel was twisted into a knot. It is a place we do not go back to. I waited. Our mother is not someone we can call, Norah said. Amber set a plate down louder than necessary, and the subject ended. Just like that. A door opened 3 inches and then closed. I could see the shape of something behind it, but pushing would have broken something fragile. You can stay here, I said, until you find something. Amber turned off the water and dried her hands on the apron. She did not look at me. How long is until? She asked. As long as it takes. Neither of them thanked me. Amber went back to the dishes. Norah picked up her textbook and opened it to the page she had been on before, the veterinary chapter on small animal care. The towel was still twisted in her lap. That was how the arrangement became permanent. Not through a conversation, not through a decision. Through the quiet math of 2 girls who had nowhere to go and a man who had an extra room and no reason to say no. The family, if that was what this was, had not been planned. It had just been the answer to a series of small practical problems. And at some point, the answers had added up to something that looked like home. I went back to the manuscript. The apartment smelled like dish soap and barley tea. Amber had left a plate of sliced fruit on the counter for me, covered with plastic wrap, the way she always did when she knew I would work late. Against all logic, I was comfortable. I was not sure what to do with that. Amber was reading something on her phone when I came downstairs. She slid a bowl of rice and miso toward me without looking up, then turned the screen so I could see. A news article. Local section. Small headline. A woman had been arrested at a business hotel downtown for failure to pay her bill. She had attempted to use a credit card registered under her former husband's name. The card had been declined. The woman had been identified by police and was being held pending further investigation. The article did not use Claire's name. It did not need to. I read it, set the phone down, picked up my coffee. Amber watched me over the rim of her mug. You are not going to say anything? There is nothing to say. She nodded slowly, like she was filing that response in a cabinet she kept somewhere behind her eyes. Then she picked up her phone and went back to scrolling. The miso was good. She had started adding tofu the way I liked it, cut into small cubes instead of the large blocks she had used the first month. I noticed that. I noticed. An editor's curse. You learn to see what has been adjusted. Gerald walked into the office without an appointment. He was wearing his best suit. I could tell because the fabric was slightly too good for a Tuesday, and the shoes had been polished that morning. He carried himself with the posture of a man who was used to being the most important person in any room he entered. Except today, he was entering a room where that did not apply. Marcus. He nodded, as if we were colleagues. I set down my red pen. Gerald was Claire's father. I had met him once, 6 years ago, in the back room of a restaurant where he had decided whether I was good enough to marry his daughter. He had concluded that I was not. Specifically, he had concluded that a man who wrote novels for a living was not a man at all. Claire is devastated, he said. He did not sit down. He stood in front of my desk with his hands clasped in front of him, projecting wounded dignity the way some men project cologne. This arrest was a misunderstanding. The card situation will be resolved, but the divorce has humiliated our entire family. I let him talk. I am not here to argue. I am here as a father. She made a mistake. People make mistakes, but she is still your wife in every way that matters. And I am asking you, man to man, to reconsider. He paused, adjusted his cuffs. Then the careful posture slipped, just a fraction. I have contacts in the publishing industry, he said. People who could make things easier for you, or more difficult. No, I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. 6 years ago, this man had sat across from me and told me my novel was unpublishable. He had said it with the same measured tone he was using now, as if he were offering career advice rather than killing a dream. I had believed him. I had walked out of that restaurant and put my pen name in a drawer and applied to the largest publishing house in the city. Claire's father had not threatened me then. He had simply told me what I was worth, and I had agreed. I did not agree anymore. You told me my writing was worthless, I said. You convinced me to quit. I believed you for 6 years. I picked up my red pen. I do not believe you anymore. Please leave. Gerald stared at me. His jaw worked once, twice, like he was chewing something that would not go down. He left. Gerald sat in his car for a long time. He made 2 phone calls. The first was to a contact at Claire's former publisher. The man's voice went careful, then quiet, then ended the conversation with a sentence Gerald had never heard from him before. I cannot help you with this. I am sorry. The second call was to the bank, where he held 3 decades of relationship capital. The woman on the line put him on hold for 4 minutes. When she came back, her tone had changed. She used his family name without the honorific. Gerald set the phone in his lap and stared through the windshield at the small, unremarkable building where his former son-in-law worked. He did not know where the interference was coming from. He only knew that every door he reached for was closing a half second before his hand arrived. Gerald was transferred to Malaysia 3 weeks later. Walter mentioned it over coffee at the office. He had heard from a business contact that a mid-level executive at a manufacturing firm had been abruptly reassigned to the company's Southeast Asian subsidiary. The subsidiary had filed for regulatory review the same week. The man's flagship project had collapsed under a compliance issue that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. His wife filed for divorce, Walter added, stirring his cup, cited abandonment. I took a sip. You do not seem surprised. I notice patterns, I said. I do not always know who is drawing them. I went home that evening and found the apartment the way I always found it now, warm, lived in. Amber in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her cafe apron, telling Norah about her regulars. The construction foreman comes at 7 every morning, she said, untying the apron strings. Orders black coffee and a red bean bun. Never says thank you, but always leaves exact change plus a small tip. The office worker after him orders the same cappuccino every single day. If we're out of oat milk, he just stands there looking lost until someone finds some. Norah listened from the table with her chin on her hand. And there are 2 women who come together every Wednesday, Amber continued. They sit in the corner booth and share 1 slice of cheesecake and talk for exactly 90 minutes. I have timed it. They always leave at the same time and go in opposite directions. Why do you remember all of that? Norah asked. Amber shrugged. I just do. Faces and patterns. I do not know why. I hung my jacket on the hook by the door. Dinner was already on the table. Rice, grilled fish, pickled vegetables, miso with the small tofu cubes. Norah's textbook was open beside her plate. Amber had left my slippers by the entrance, lined up the way I liked them, toes pointing out. 3 months ago, I had come home to a dark apartment and a wife who did not know what time I finished work. Now I came home to the smell of grilled fish and a girl who cataloged strangers for fun and another girl who read veterinary textbooks she was 2 years away from needing. This was not the plan. None of this had been the plan. The plan had been to survive the divorce, take the new job, and rebuild quietly. Instead, the apartment had filled up with people, and the people had filled up the silence. And somewhere in the middle of all that filling, I had started looking forward to opening the front door. I sat down at the table. Amber poured my tea before I asked. Norah closed her textbook and looked at me with an expression that was becoming familiar. Calm, attentive, present. "How was work?" she asked. "Good. You always say good." "It is always good." She almost smiled. Almost. I picked up my chopsticks and ate dinner with two girls who had chosen my apartment as the place they did not leave. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I did not eat quickly so I could get back to something else. I ate slowly because there was nowhere I would rather be. The editor in me noticed that. The rest of me decided not to examine it too closely. Eleanor had been coming to the office 3 times a week. Manuscripts, feedback sessions, the occasional argument about chapter structure that she always won. I was used to her rhythm by now. What I was not used to was the car. A black sedan pulled up to the front entrance. Not a taxi, not a rideshare. A proper driver's car, polished to a shine that made the July heat look like it was avoiding the paint. Eleanor stepped out with her manuscript folder and the same composed expression she wore to everything. The driver came around to open her door. Dark jacket, professional posture, hair pulled back tight. Then she looked at me. "Marcus." Her voice had not changed in 7 years. "You look exactly the same." I stared. My brain reached backward through a decade of filed away faces to find the one that matched. Hannah. She was taller than I remembered, or maybe she just stood straighter. The last time I had seen her was at a university farewell dinner, 7 years ago, wearing a tracksuit and complaining about her Achilles tendon. Now she was in a fitted dark jacket with her shoulders squared like a person who had stopped apologizing for taking up space. "You look different," I said. "I got better at my job." She said it the way someone says the weather is nice. Factual, no decoration. Eleanor watched us from the doorway. Her red eyes moved between my face and Hannah's face with the precision of someone cataloging data points. She said nothing. She did not need to. "Hannah is my family's driver," Eleanor said. "She has been with us for 3 years. 3 years. Hannah had been this close to my life for 3 years, and I had not known. "Good to see you," I said. "Good to see you too." 7 years compressed into 6 sentences. She did not perform the reunion. She simply resumed contact as if the gap had been a logistics problem that was now solved. The author dinner was Walter's idea. Eleanor's second manuscript had been accepted, and Walter believed in celebrating small victories because, as he put it, the big ones never felt as good as you expected. Hugo arrived in a white blazer with a red pocket square, because of course he did. "Marcus." He spread his arms like he was accepting an award. "You look like a man who has been editing too many pages and living too few. And you look like a man who gets recognized at airports." "I do." He sat down and ordered for the table before anyone could object. The trick is to act surprised every time. Hugo was the second best novelist in the country. He had told me this himself, multiple times, usually while buying my drinks. We had been in the same university seminar, him, me, and Hannah. The 3 of us used to argue about narrative structure until the bar closed. Now, he argued about it on television. Hannah sat at the end of the table in a dark blouse she had changed into after her shift. She was quieter than I remembered. She laughed at Hugo's jokes, but did not volunteer her own. She drank steadily, not fast, not slow. Just enough that by the time dessert arrived, the professional composure had loosened exactly 1 layer. "You too," Hugo said, pointing his glass at me and then at Hannah, "have not changed. She still watches you when you are not looking. You still do not notice." "I notice plenty," I said. "You notice manuscripts," Hugo grinned. "Different skill set." Eleanor observed all of this from across the table with the expression of someone solving an equation in her head. Walter ate his steak and stayed out of it. Smart man. By 10, Hannah's eyes were closing between sentences. She had driven 4 hours that day and drunk more than she meant to. Her head tilted. Her hand slipped off the table. She was asleep in her chair before the check arrived. Hugo looked at me. "Your move, editor." I stood up, walked around the table, and lifted her. She was lighter than I expected and heavier than nothing. Her head settled against my shoulder with the automatic trust of someone who had trained herself not to need help and then needed it once. "I will get a cab," I said. "You will do nothing of the sort." Hugo pulled out his phone. "I will get the cab. You carry the girl." Division of labor. Her apartment was on the 7th floor. She had given me her key in the cab without opening her eyes. Just reached into her jacket pocket, found it by touch, and pressed it into my palm. Muscle memory. She had done this before with someone. Or she trusted me enough that the gesture did not require consciousness. I unlocked the door, carried her in, and set her down on the couch. She curled onto her side immediately, one arm tucked under her head. I pulled a blanket from the back of the couch and covered her. Then I saw the bookshelf. It was a small shelf next to the couch, mostly practical, a few martial arts manuals, a stack of driving certifications, a framed photo of what looked like her brothers at a barbecue. Normal things. The kind of shelf that tells you a person lives here and does not overthink it. Except for the bottom row. 3 books, paperbacks, spines cracked from reading, not from age. I recognized the covers before I recognized the titles, because I had designed those covers. I had sat in a print shop at 2 in the morning and argued about the font weight on those covers. They were my novels, all 3 of them. The only 3 I ever published, under a pen name nobody remembered, from a publisher that no longer existed. You could not find these books in any store. You could not order them online. The print runs had been small enough that finding even 1 copy would take effort. Finding all 3 would take intention. She had all 3 in a row on the bottom shelf, where you keep the things you reach for most. I stood in front of that shelf for a long time. I did not touch them. I did not pick them up to check if she had dog-eared the pages or written in the margins. I did not need to. The cracked spines said enough. I filled a glass with water, set it on the counter where she would see it, and let myself out. The walk to the train station took 11 minutes. I know because I counted the steps. It was easier than thinking about what I had just seen. The next morning, a man I had never seen walked into SR Bunko and asked for me by name. He was not tall. He did not need to be. His shoulders were wide enough that he turned slightly to fit through the doorframe. Close-cropped dark hair, square jaw. Black suit stretched across a frame that made the suit look like it was losing an argument. Marcus? He extended his hand. His grip was controlled, firm enough to communicate, gentle enough to prove he was choosing to be gentle. I am Sam, Hannah's brother. I remember her mentioning you. She mentioned you too. He studied my face the way Hannah had studied it yesterday, cataloging, not judging. I understand you brought my sister home last night after she fell asleep at a work dinner. I did. I left water on her counter. Sam considered this for what felt like a very long time. His expression did not change. He was running some kind of internal calculation that I was not invited to see the work on. I appreciate that, he said. He reached into his jacket and set a business card on the reception desk. If you ever need anything, I am easy to find. He left. The whole visit lasted less than 2 minutes. I picked up the card, his name, a phone number, nothing else. No title, no company. I put it in my wallet. The card was both a thank you and a background check delivered in person. Hannah's brothers treated proximity to her as a threat assessment problem. I could not blame them. A month passed. The season turned without announcing itself. Eleanor came to the office 3 times a week. Manuscripts, tea, the occasional correction that was always right. Amber left dinner on the stove when I worked late. Labeled containers with reheating instructions written in her careful handwriting. Norah read my editorial notes over my shoulder and occasionally made corrections that I kept. Hannah drove Eleanor and stayed for tea when I made it. I noticed they had started noticing each other. Not with hostility, not yet. It was more like 4 people standing in the same room who had each independently concluded that the room was smaller than they expected. Eleanor watched Hannah with complete attention and no readable expression. Hannah watched Eleanor the way a bodyguard watches her principal's environment, professionally, with occasional flickers of something less professional. Amber watched all of them and said nothing. Norah watched me watching them and turned a page in her textbook. I did not know what to do with any of this, so I made more tea. You are making tea again, Amber said from the kitchen doorway. Her arms were crossed. That is the 3rd pot today. People keep arriving. People keep arriving because you keep making tea. She had a point. I chose not to acknowledge it. Walter called me into his office on a Tuesday. Sit down, he said. He was smiling. Walter did not smile often, so when he did, it either meant someone had written something extraordinary or something had happened that his decades in publishing had not prepared him for. Today, it was the second one. The Kaida Group just doubled their investment in SR Bunko. I let that land. The first investment had been generous. This one was structural. This was not patronage. This was someone deciding that SR Bunko was a permanent fixture. Doubled, I repeated. Doubled. We are moving to the new building next month. Bigger offices, room for 6 more editorial desks. He took off his reading glasses and polished them. I have been in this industry for 30 years. I have never had an investor double down this fast. I looked through the glass wall of Walter's office. Eleanor was at her usual desk, reviewing page proofs with a red pen. She must have felt me looking because she glanced up. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes, a steadiness, a lack of surprise, told me everything I needed to know about where the investment had come from. I did not ask. She did not explain. The pattern was undeniable now. Every door that opened for SR Bunko had fingerprints on the handle that I could not quite see. I noticed patterns. I did not always know who was drawing them, but the hand was getting harder to ignore. Diane was already seated when I arrived. I almost did not recognize her. The last time I had seen her, she had been behind a mahogany desk, signing termination papers with the efficiency of someone who believed she was making the right call. That woman had worn authority like a tailored jacket. This woman was wearing the same jacket, but it did not fit anymore. Strands escaped her bun. The stress lines around her eyes had deepened into something permanent. She stood when she saw me. Then she did something I had never seen her do in 6 years of working under her. She bowed. Not a slight nod. A full bow, deep enough that the other customers turned to look. A waitress froze mid-step with a tray of drinks. "Please," Diane said. Her voice cracked on the word. "Please come back." I sat down across from her. "You are causing a scene. I do not care." She straightened up, but her hands were shaking. "Takanawa Publishing is finished. Every major author has left. Every junior editor worth anything followed you to SR Bunko or went freelance. We cannot fill a single issue." I waited. She was rehearsed. Her hands were shaking, but her sentences were not. "I can offer you 15% above your previous salary. Lead editor on whatever accounts you want. A formal apology to the industry for how your departure was handled." She leaned forward. "I will put it in writing. 6 months ago, this offer would have meant something. 6 months ago, I was a fired editor sleeping on a couch while his wife ran off with his colleague. The same woman sitting across from me had signed those papers without hearing my side. She had believed Colin's lie, that I was the one having the affair, because it was easier than investigating. "No," I said. Her face did not fall. It emptied. "Why? You fired me because Colin told you I was unfaithful to my wife. You did not ask me. You did not check. You chose to believe the man who was sleeping with her over the man who had been editing your best accounts for 6 years. I kept my voice level. An editor's voice. The one I used when a manuscript had structural problems that the author did not want to hear about. Colin has been fired since then, for incompetence, and for doing exactly what he accused me of. You know that now." "I know." Her voice was barely audible. "Then you know why I am not coming back." I stood up. "I am busy." I left her sitting in a family restaurant with an empty seat across from her and an offer nobody was going to accept. The waitress watched me walk out with wide eyes. The customers at the next table whispered something I did not catch. I did not look back. There was nothing behind me that I needed. Diane sat in her car for 20 minutes after Marcus left. The engine was off. The windows were up. The summer heat pressed in from every direction. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to the number she had called 3 times that morning. The call connected on the 7th ring. He said no. Her voice was flat. He did not even think about it. The voice on the other end asked something. He listed everything. The firing, Colin, the lie. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. He remembers every single thing I chose not to check. She ended the call and sat in the heat. The publisher she had built her career on was bleeding out, and the one person who could stop it had just walked away with 2 words and a steady voice. She had fired the wrong man. She had always known. She had just never expected him to become someone who would make her say it out loud. Walter had called it a manuscript retreat. Eleanor had called it a working trip. I packed 2 red pens and a binder of editorial notes. Within 10 minutes of boarding, I understood that nobody else had packed anything related to work. The first-class car was empty. Not mostly empty. Completely empty. 5 of us and 36 green leather seats stretching to the far wall. Amber dealt cards on a fold-down table, while Norah arranged her hand with the precision of someone sorting evidence. Eleanor sat across the aisle in a white sundress and a straw hat that made her look like she had wandered out of a foreign film. Hannah took the seat beside me, said nothing, and looked out the window. "You won that seat fair and square," I said. She glanced at me. "Rock, paper, scissors. On the platform. You were buying coffee. Who organized a tournament for a train seat?" "Amber." I looked at Amber. She waved without looking up from her cards. A month ago, I had been eating alone at my desk every night. Now, I was riding an empty first-class car to a mountain resort with 4 women, and the biggest controversy of the morning was a seating arrangement I had not been consulted on. A man in a black suit appeared with a snack cart. He was not a train attendant. He was Sam's brother, one of Eleanor's family staff, built like a vending machine in a blazer. Eleanor's face went very still. Hannah stood up. The 2 of them pulled him into the vestibule, and I heard a brief, intense exchange of whispers, followed by a thump that might have been a shin kick. When they came back, Hannah's expression was professionally neutral and Eleanor's ears were red. The attendant returned with complimentary drinks and a smile that suggested he had been threatened. "Eleanor," I said, "this car is empty. Summer, low bookings. The entire car. Coincidence." Amber leaned over. "Her grandpa bought the car, right?" Eleanor said nothing. Her ears got redder. Norah turned a page in the travel magazine she had found in the seat pocket and circled something with my red pen. which she had stolen from my binder without asking. The mountains outside the window were getting closer. The city had fallen away behind us, and the green was starting, that deep layered green that only exists in the hours between Tokyo and the highlands. I watched it pass and thought about how strange it was that the furthest I had ever traveled for work was a publishing conference in Yokohama, and the furthest Clare had ever wanted to go was the department store one station over. I did not think about Clare for long. The landscape was better company. The hotel was not a hotel. It was a small country. Sam's brother led us from the station directly to a resort complex that spread across the valley floor like a city planning project. Ski slopes with dormant lifts standing against the summer sky, a golf course, a shopping mall the size of 3 city blocks, a bowling alley, 36 guest rooms in the main building alone, and cottages scattered across the mountainside behind it like white shells on a green beach. "This is my villa," Eleanor said, with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed the line and the delivery of someone who had not rehearsed it enough. "Your villa has a concierge desk," Amber said. "And a ski lift," Norah added quietly. "And a shopping mall," I said. Eleanor's composure cracked for exactly 1 second. Then she straightened her hat and walked toward the entrance as though she owned the place, which, as it turned out, she did. Her family did. The Kaida Group owned the entire resort, every room, every slope, every blade of grass between the parking lot and the tree line. The receptionist greeted us by name, all 5 of us. She knew our room preferences, our dietary restrictions, and apparently what kind of pillow I liked, which was information I had never given anyone. There were no other guests in the lobby. There were no other guests anywhere. 3 rooms had been prepared. Eleanor announced the arrangements with the authority of a general deploying troops. She would take a single, Amber and Norah in one double. Hannah and I would share the suite because I was, in her words, the professional whose working conditions mattered most. "That is not how room assignments work," I said. "It is how they work at my villa." Hannah raised her hand. "I won the tournament." "There was no tournament." "Rock, paper, scissors." On the platform. She picked up her bag, walked past me, and disappeared into the suite. The suite had 3 bedrooms, a living room the size of my old apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake, and a staircase. An actual staircase inside a hotel room. Amber crossed her arms. Norah tilted her head. Eleanor watched Hannah's retreating back with an expression that was perfectly neutral and extremely loud. I stood in the lobby holding my binder of editorial notes and understanding for the first time that I had brought a pen to a battlefield. The mall was a 10-minute walk from the hotel. I noticed 7 men in black suits and sunglasses positioned at various intervals along the path. One of them was pretending to read a newspaper. Another was pretending to eat ice cream. A third was standing beside a lamppost doing nothing at all, which was somehow the least convincing disguise of the 3. "Eleanor," I said, "I do not control my grandfather's decisions. Your grandfather deployed a security perimeter for a shopping trip." Hannah leaned in. "Solomon arranged undercover staff. Their families are mixed in as regular shoppers." "How many?" 12 on the ground, 2 mobile units. Eleanor adjusted her hat and kept walking. Her albino complexion and white hair made her the least inconspicuous person within 100 meters, surrounded by the most conspicuous security detail I had ever seen. And somehow, she still carried herself like someone who believed they were blending in. The bonus from 2 months ago was sitting untouched in my account. I offered to buy everyone whatever they wanted. A bonus from 2 months ago that I had saved entirely. The 4 of them pretended they did not want anything while their eyes tracked every storefront we passed. Amber broke first. She pulled me into a clothing shop, held up a blouse, and asked my opinion with the intensity of someone requesting a verdict. I said it looked nice. She bought 3. Eleanor discovered a capsule machine near the food court. She had never seen one. I showed her how to insert the coin and turn the handle. When the plastic capsule dropped, she held it up to the light with the wide-eyed wonder of someone who had lived in mansions her entire life and had never encountered a 200 yen toy. We got matching keychain straps. She attached hers to her flip phone with the careful deliberation of someone defusing a bomb, her pale fingers trembling slightly, and then looked at me. "For your phone too," she said. "So we match." I put mine on. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that made you realize how rarely she let anyone see it and how much it cost her to offer it. Norah stopped at a pet shop window and did not move for 20 minutes. She watched the kittens tumble over each other, her face pressed close to the glass, her reflection overlapping with theirs. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders dropped. Something in her had gone very still and very focused and very peaceful. She did not say a word. She did not need to. Wherever she was in that moment, It was the first time I had seen her arrive somewhere she actually wanted to be. I watched her watching them. I did not interrupt. Some discoveries are not mine to narrate. Hannah walked beside me through the rest of the mall. She bought nothing. She said almost nothing. She matched my pace exactly, and when our arms brushed, she did not pull away, and neither did I. Somewhere behind us, Amber was arguing cheerfully with a shop clerk about a return policy, and Eleanor was explaining to Norah that you could not actually buy a kitten at a pet store window, and the whole afternoon felt like something from a life I had not earned yet but was being allowed to borrow. 4 women. 4 completely different ways of saying the same thing without saying it. I was an editor. I could read subtext. The problem was that the subtext was no longer sub. Amber dragged me back to the clothing store after lunch. "I need a second opinion," she said, and disappeared behind a fitting room curtain before I could point out that my first opinion had been fine. The curtain opened. She stepped out in a fitted sundress, white with thin straps, hemline above the knee. She turned once, slowly, and the hem caught the air. "Well, it looks good." She stepped closer, close enough that I had to look down to meet her eyes. The store was empty. The clerk was restocking in the back. It was just us, and the fluorescent lights, and the silence. "I am not a kid, Marcus." Her voice was low and steady. No performance, no flirtation. "I am 17. I have a job. I cook your meals. I manage your apartment. I have been taking care of things since before you noticed. I need you to see that." Something in her expression shifted. Fierce and fragile, both at once, the way a match looks in the instant before it catches. "I know," I said. She held my gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she stepped back behind the curtain. "I am buying this dress," she said through the fabric, "for a specific occasion. You will know when." The curtain in the next stall flew open. Hannah stood there holding a shopping bag, her face drained of color. She had walked in at the wrong moment. She had heard the wrong sentence. Whatever conclusion she had drawn was already racing across her face before I could speak. "It is not what it looks like." Her eyes went red. She dropped the bag and ran. Amber came out dressed again, saw the empty stall, and her confidence collapsed. "Oh no, oh no, no, no." We found Hannah 20 minutes later on a bench near the fountain, arms crossed, jaw set, crying without sound. Amber sat beside her, close but not touching, and explained what had actually happened. The explanation was frank, direct, and included the sentence, "I was showing him a dress, not my body, you enormous baby." Hannah punched Amber's shoulder. Amber punched back. Then Hannah laughed through the tears, ugly and real, and the tension broke like a fever. 3 meters away, I waited. Some things are resolved between the people involved and not by the man who caused the confusion. An editor knows when the manuscript does not need his pen. He just waits. The sun was dropping behind the tree line when I saw him. Colin was standing across the street from the hotel entrance, half hidden behind a rental car, holding a camera with a long lens pointed at our group. He was thinner than the last time I had seen him. His jacket was wrinkled at the shoulders. His hair, once meticulously styled, fell across his forehead in unwashed strands. The jaw that used to anchor his charm was covered in patchy stubble. He had tracked Amber, her cafe, her regular customers, someone who mentioned a trip to Karuizawa over a counter while ordering a latte. The specifics did not matter. What mattered was that a man who had destroyed my marriage and framed me for his own affair was now standing in the parking lot of a mountain resort, photographing the woman who cooked my breakfast. I took out my phone, photographed him. Clear shot. Face, jacket, camera, license plate of the rental behind him. Sent the image to Sam with one word, "Here." Colin saw me looking. His face went through something complicated. Fear, then defiance, then the particular expression of a man who has lost everything and has decided that makes him dangerous rather than pathetic. He lowered the camera and walked away quickly, shoulders hunched, head down, moving like a man who had forgotten how to walk without looking over his shoulder. I did not follow. I did not need to. Sam's reply came in 11 seconds. Understood. Amber was watching the spot where Colin had been standing. She had seen everything. "Was that him?" she asked, "the one who slept with Clare?" "Yes," she nodded once. Her expression was calm. Whatever she was feeling, she had decided it was not going to ruin the afternoon. She took my arm and walked me back toward the hotel, and her grip was steady, and she did not look back. Colin sat in the back seat of Sam's car and tried to understand how he had gotten there. One moment he had been walking toward the station. The next, a man built like a vault had appeared beside him, said, "Please get in," with the politeness of someone who was not asking, and opened the rear door. Sam drove without speaking. The trees passed the tinted windows in a blur of green. The air conditioning hummed. Colin sat with his hands between his knees and stared at the driver's headrest. "Where are we going?" No answer. "I have rights. You cannot just take someone off the street." Sam glanced in the rearview mirror. His expression did not change. "Yes," he said calmly. "I am sure you do." He kept driving. The trees kept passing. Colin did not ask again. His hands were shaking. That was the last anyone saw of Colin for a long time. His fate was being arranged through channels I had not asked about and would not ask about. Eleanor asked me to the lake after dinner. She handed me a sealed envelope, pink, with a small heart sticker holding the flap, and said, "Read this before I say anything." I sat on the white bench at the water's edge while she stood 3 steps away, facing the mountains. The lake reflected the last band of gold at the horizon. Somewhere in the trees, a bird was calling a note it never finished. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten. Her script was precise and beautiful, the penmanship of a girl who had been trained in calligraphy since childhood because her family believed presentation was a form of respect. She had written a love letter in the register of a literary critique. She had analyzed what she felt for me, cited specific moments. The day I returned her first manuscript with notes that treated her work as serious literature rather than a teenage hobby. The afternoon at the capsule machine when she realized no one had ever shown her something that small and that pointless and that kind. The evening she watched me through the office glass after the doubled investment and understood that the wall between editor and author had been gone for months and she had been pretending not to notice. The last paragraph, "I believe I love you. I am uncertain what to do with this information. I thought you should have it. My real name is Eleanor Kaida. I wanted you to know that too." I looked up. She was still facing the mountains. Her reflection in the lake was trembling because she was trembling, a fine vibration running through her shoulders that she was trying to suppress with the same willpower she applied to everything. "Eleanor," she turned. Her eyes were red. She had been crying the entire time I was reading, silently, without moving, without making a sound. The composure that had carried her through every meeting, every editorial session, every confrontation with power and money and expectation had cracked at the edge of a lake in Karuizawa because she had given a letter to a man and was waiting for him to break her heart. "I need to be honest with you," I said. "I have only ever known you as a writer, as the most talented author I have ever worked with. That is not nothing, but it means I do not yet know you as anything else. I need time to learn that." Her voice broke on the first word. "I thought you were going to say it was a child's whim. It is not a whim. It is the most articulate love letter I have ever read, and I have read a lot of manuscripts." She pressed both hands against her face. Then she dropped them and looked at me directly, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked exactly her age. Not composed, not evaluating, not the heiress, not the author. Just a young woman standing at the edge of water, terrified, hoping. "Take as long as you need," she said. Her voice was steady again. "I will still be here. I have been here for a long time already." Before I could say another word, Norah stepped out from behind a tree. She had been there before us. She came to the lake every evening to sit with the quiet. She had no way of knowing we would be here tonight, and the look on her face said she wished desperately that she had picked a different bench, or a different evening, or a different life in which she was not standing 6 feet from 2 people in the middle of the most private conversation she had ever overheard. She saw the letter in my hand. She saw Eleanor's red eyes. She understood everything instantly because Norah always understood everything instantly. She just never said so. "I also have something to say." She looked at my collar rather than my face. Her voice was quiet and precise, as though she were reading from notes she had written and memorized and was now delivering at the wrong venue. "I do not know when it started. I know I cannot imagine leaving. I know this is inconvenient. I know you see me as someone you protect." A pause. The crickets filled it. "I am sorry for the timing." Then, softer, almost to herself, "I am not sorry for the rest." 6 sentences. 6 of the most direct sentences she had spoken in the 4 months I had known her. Eleanor stared at her. Norah stared at the grass. I stood between them holding a love letter and a confession, and the complete absence of an adequate response to either. Amber and Hannah stepped out of the shadows at the same moment, from opposite directions, as though choreographed by a god with a vindictive sense of comedy. They had followed me separately. Neither knew the other was there until they emerged from the tree line at the same instant and locked eyes across the clearing, like 2 cats who had both been stalking the same mouse. Amber recovered first. We all heard that. Eleanor closed her eyes. Norah went perfectly still, the way prey does when it realizes the clearing is not empty. Hannah's jaw was set hard enough to cut glass. I looked at Amber. "How long were you there?" "Long enough to know that I am not the only one who has been holding my breath for 3 months. The 5 of us stood in the moonlight. The lake reflected us all, upside down, wavering. Nobody spoke. The whole clearing felt like the moment between the end of a manuscript and the first editorial note. When the silence is not empty, but full of everything that has not been said yet. Amber took a breath, uncrossed her arms, set her shoulders the way she did when she was about to do something either brave or insane. "This is not going to work the normal way," she said. "We all know that. 4 women, 1 man. Someone gets chosen. 3 people get hurt. That is the math." She looked at each woman in turn, Eleanor, Norah, Hannah, then at me. "So here is what I propose. All 4 of us, trial basis, 6 months. Nobody gets special treatment. Nobody gets eliminated. We each get a fair chance to know you. You get a fair chance to know us. And at the end of it, you choose, or you do not choose. But at least nobody spent 6 months pretending they were fine while their chest was caving in." The silence after that lasted long enough for me to count 4 heartbeats. Mine was the loudest. "That is insane," I said. "Yes. You cannot design a system for something like this." I just did, in about 12 seconds, which is more than you have done with 4 confessions and 0 answers. Eleanor opened her eyes. "She is scheming. This arrangement benefits the boldest personality in the group, and she knows exactly who that is." Amber did not deny it. "I am also the only person offering a solution that does not end with someone crying alone in a hotel room tonight." Hannah looked at the ground, then at me. Her eyes were steady and red and tired. "Is this what you want?" I thought about Clare, about the decade I spent choosing wrong because I was afraid of choosing at all, about the fact that 4 women had just told me, in 4 completely different languages, that they had chosen me, about the particular absurdity of being an editor at a small publisher with 1 decent suit to his name, standing at the edge of a mountain lake while 4 women waited for him to say something worth the silence. "All right," I said. 2 words, no drama, no speech, just a man at a lake, under a moon, agreeing to something he did not fully understand because the alternative was pretending he did not feel what he felt. And he had spent 10 years doing that, and it had cost him everything. Nora's knees buckled. Hannah caught her before she hit the grass, 1 arm around her waist, automatic. Amber said, "That went better than I expected." Eleanor folded her arms and said, "I am going to win," and walked back toward the hotel with the posture of a woman who had already drafted a strategy document and a timeline. I stood at the lake alone. 4 women had just confessed to me by a lake in Karuizawa. I was an editor. I owned 1 suit. My ex-wife was living in a net cafe. My former colleague had just been collected by a man who could bench press a sedan. None of this was in my job description. None of this had ever been in anyone's job description. I picked up Eleanor's letter from the bench, folded it along the creases she had made, placed it in my jacket pocket, next to the pen she had bought me that afternoon, because she had noticed mine had a broken nib 3 weeks ago and had said nothing about it until she found one that matched. Then I walked back toward the hotel. The moon followed me the whole way, and I did not count my steps because I was too busy trying to figure out what I had just agreed to and whether the answer was everything or nothing, and whether there was a difference. The apartment door was unlocked. That was the first wrong thing. Amber always locked it. Norah double-checked. I stepped inside with my bag still on my shoulder and found a pair of basketball shoes in the entryway that did not belong to anyone who lived here. Size 8, women's. Scuff marks on the left toe from a pivot foot. I knew those shoes. The living room lights were on. Amber was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed. Norah was seated at the table with a textbook open, but she was not reading it. She was watching the couch. On the couch, stretched out with 1 arm behind her head and the television remote balanced on her stomach, was my stepsister Victoria. She looked up at me the way you look at someone who has arrived late to their own apartment, which, technically, I had. "Took you long enough." She swung her legs off the couch and stood, tall, taller than I remembered. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that she must have tied during practice because it was still damp at the edges. Athletic shoulders. The posture of someone who expected every room to rearrange itself around her. "Victoria," I set my bag down. "Why are you on my couch?" "My lease ended." She said it the way you say the sky is blue. "Mom and Dad said I could stay here for the summer. Your room has the best light for morning stretches, so I moved your books to the shelf I installed. You are welcome." I looked at Amber. Amber's expression said she had been containing this situation for approximately 4 hours and was running out of containment. "She showed up at 2, Amber said. "She had a key. Mom gave it to her," I said. "Mom gave it to her," Amber confirmed, in a tone that suggested Mom and I would be having a conversation. Victoria looked past me at Amber and Norah, then back at me. Her jaw tightened. "So," she crossed her arms. "Who are they?" I explained. "Former students. Staying with me. Family situation." I kept it short because Victoria's eyes were getting narrower with every sentence, and I did not want to find out what happened at 0. Former students, she repeated. 2 girls, living with you, in your apartment. Yes. For months. Yes. Victoria turned to Amber. How old are you? Amber smiled. It was the smile she used when someone underestimated her. Old enough to cook dinner for 5. Would you like some? I want you to leave, Victoria said. The room went very still. Norah closed her textbook quietly. Amber's smile did not move. I recognized the configuration. It was the same one she had used on Claire's lawyer. Victoria, I said. They are strangers. Victoria's voice was climbing. They have been living in your apartment and you did not tell me. You did not tell Mom. I am your family. They are not. Get them out. Amber took 1 step forward, just 1. Her voice was calm and level, and carried the specific weight of someone who had fought for her place in this apartment from the first night. I have been here longer than you. Norah has been here longer than you. Marcus is not obligated to choose, and he already chose not to. Victoria's hand came up. Amber did not flinch. Nobody, I said, stepping between them, is getting thrown out. Victoria stared at me. Her eyes were bright and hard and furious, and something underneath the fury was not fury at all. She turned on her heel, walked into my bedroom, and closed the door behind her with the exact force of someone who had spent 17 years slamming doors at precisely the right decibel. Amber exhaled. Norah opened her textbook again. I slept on the couch. 3 days later, the apartment had settled into an armed truce. Victoria claimed my room. Amber claimed the kitchen. Norah claimed the table by the window. I claimed the couch and tried not to think about the fact that I was a guest in my own home. It was a Thursday evening. Eleanor and Hannah were at a publisher event across town. Victoria was at the outdoor basketball court downstairs. I could hear the rhythmic thump of the ball through the open balcony door. Norah had taken the dog out for a walk. The dog. That was new. 3 days ago, Norah had come home from the convenience store with a miniature dachshund puppy tucked inside her jacket. She had not asked permission. She had stood in the doorway holding this trembling, enormous-eared creature and said very quietly, he was alone behind the station. I could not leave him. She named him Biscuit. He slept on her bed from the first night. Amber stepped onto the balcony and sat beside me. She had 2 mugs. She handed me one without asking if I wanted it. We sat for a while. The basketball thumping stopped. Started again. Stopped. Can I tell you something? Amber said. You're going to regardless. She smiled. Not the weapon smile. The real one, which was smaller and arrived slower. When I was 7, I went to a cram school near the station. Summer program. I hated it. I sipped my tea. The other kids called me Gaijin. She said the word flatly, like a fact. Because of my hair. I was the only blonde kid in the class. They pulled it. They hid my shoes. One boy told me I should go back to whatever country I came from. I was born 6 blocks from that school. The basketball had stopped again. Silence from below. One afternoon, I went up to the roof. She was looking at the city lights, not at me. The door was supposed to be locked, but someone had propped it open with a brick. I stood at the edge and looked down and thought about how easy it would be to just stop being the kid everyone hated. My chest went tight. A teaching assistant came up. Her voice had not changed. Still flat, still factual. He did not grab me. He did not yell. He sat down on the gravel about 3 feet away from me and said something like, "The vending machine downstairs has hot cocoa. Want one?" And I said no. And he said, "That is fine," and just sat there. He did not leave. He did not lecture me. He just stayed until I got bored of standing at the edge. She paused. He brought me the cocoa anyway. We sat on the roof drinking it, and he asked me what manga I was reading, and I told him about this series I liked, and he actually knew it. He knew the characters. He talked to me like I was a person. Not a problem. She turned and looked at me. That was you. The sound that came out of my mouth was not a word. It was the sound of a man being handed a memory he had completely misplaced. Summer cram school. I was 19. Part-time teaching assistant between semesters. 50 students. I remembered the building. I remembered the vending machine. I did not remember the girl on the roof. I told you I was going to marry you someday, Amber said. You laughed, gently. You said, "Sure, come find me when you are older." And I have spent the last 13 years doing exactly that. I could not speak. Do you remember? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say that of course I remembered the most important moment of her life, that I had carried it with me the way she had carried it. But I had 50 students that summer. I was 19 and tired and working 3 jobs, and I had sat with a lot of kids who seemed lonely. I remember the building, I said. I remember the vending machine. I remember the cocoa was too sweet. It was. I do not remember you, she nodded. Not hurt, not angry, just the nod of someone who had always known this was the answer and had decided 13 years ago that it did not matter. That is okay, she said. I remember you. That is enough. The basketball started again downstairs. Amber went inside. I sat with her story and the cocoa I could not taste anymore, and the sound of a basketball, and the weight of a life I had apparently saved without knowing it. The front door opened. Small footsteps. The click of tiny claws on hardwood. Norah stepped onto the balcony. Biscuit was trotting beside her on a leash that was slightly too long for him, so he kept stepping on it and then looking offended. She unclipped the leash. The dog walked directly to me, sniffed my shoe, and sat on my foot. Norah watched this. He usually does not trust people that fast, she said quietly. I looked down at the dog on my foot. He looked up at me with the enormous liquid eyes of a creature who had decided, without evidence, that I was reliable. Norah went inside without another word. I sat on the balcony with a dog on my foot and a story on my chest and the distant thump of a basketball and the knowledge that the girl in the kitchen had loved me since she was 7 years old because I had bought her a cup of cocoa. Some debts are paid back, some debts are paid forward, and some debts just sit on your foot and breathe. Victoria had been living with us for a week when Hannah mentioned the arrangement. It was not her fault. Hannah was sitting at the table, going over a delivery schedule with Amber, and Victoria was on the floor stretching her hamstrings after practice. And Hannah said something about making sure everyone gets a fair turn with the car this weekend, and Victoria's head came up like a hunting dog catching a scent. Fair turn, Victoria said. With what? Hannah looked at me. The look said, I thought she knew. She did not know. Marcus has 4 girlfriends, Amber said, because Amber had never in her life chosen the gentle version of a sentence when the direct one was available. Me, Norah, Eleanor, Hannah, we are all aware. We agreed to it at the lake. It has been working. Victoria stood up, slowly, the stretch forgotten. Her face went through several configurations in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, something that looked like arithmetic. 4, she said. 4, Amber confirmed. Victoria turned to me. Her expression had settled on fury, but it was the wrong shape. I had seen Victoria furious before. This was not the fury of a judgmental stepsister. This was something else. Something that had been compressed for a very long time and was now being squeezed from an unexpected angle. You, she said. 4, yes. After what Clare did to you, after everything, you are doing this? It is not what Clare did. It is exactly what Clare did, except you are the one doing it to 4 people instead of 1. Hannah quietly picked up her schedule and moved to the kitchen. Smart woman. Amber took Norah and Biscuit to the bedroom. The apartment emptied around us like a theater clearing before the real show. Victoria stood in the middle of the living room. Her hands were at her sides. She was not looking at me. I need to say something, she said, and I need you to not say anything until I am done. Okay. She tried to start, stopped, tried again. Her jaw worked. She was an athlete. She was used to controlling her body. Her body was not cooperating. When Mom married your dad, I was 3. She spoke to the wall. I was sick. I was in the hospital more than I was home. You were 15. You came every day, every single day. You brought me books I could not read yet, and you read them to me. And when I threw a tantrum because Mom did not come, you stayed. You said you would always be there because you were my brother. She swallowed. I believed you. I believed you because you were the first person who had ever kept a promise to me. I followed you everywhere. I memorized your schedule. When you started dating Clare, I was 5, and I did not understand why I was so angry. I just knew that someone was taking you, and it felt like the hospital again, like being left. Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together and forced it back into place. At your wedding, I was 10. I sat in the front row in a white dress Mom picked out, and I cried. Everyone thought it was because I was happy. I was not happy. I was watching the only person who had ever stayed choose someone who would eventually leave, and she did leave. And I was right, and being right felt like nothing. She turned to face me. Her eyes were red. I threw myself into basketball. I became the best player in the prefecture because if I was running, I did not have to think about you. I won the national championship in middle school, and the first person I looked for in the stands was you. You were there. You were always there, even when I told you not to come. She took a breath. I am not your sister. We share no blood. I have been in love with you since I was 10 years old, and I have spent the last decade pretending I was not, because the word sister was supposed to mean I could not. I know this is wrong. I know about the others. I know it is too late. I just needed you to know it before I could stop feeling it. She looked at the wall again. Her shoulders were shaking. The room was very quiet. I thought about what to say. I thought about all the correct things, the responsible things, the things a good older stepbrother would say to close this door gently and permanently. Thank you for telling me, I said. She flinched, as if she had expected worse and received something she did not know how to hold. That is it? You waited 10 years. You deserve more than a speech. But right now, that is what I have. I told the others the next morning. Amber was in the kitchen. Norah was at the table with Biscuit in her lap. Eleanor had arrived early with a manuscript draft and a thermos of tea that probably cost more than my couch. Hannah was standing by the door with her keys, about to leave for a shift. Victoria told me how she feels, I said. She has been in love with me since she was 10. She told me last night. I want to bring her into the arrangement. Silence. The specific silence of 5 people doing math at different speeds. Eleanor spoke first. She set down her thermos with the precision of someone placing a chess piece. The logic of the arrangement does not exclude anyone who makes an honest declaration, she declared. The terms hold. Hannah paused with her hand on the doorknob. Her eyes were steady. I was the last one in. I cannot object to someone coming after me. Amber leaned against the kitchen counter. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at me. 5 is only slightly more impossible than 4. A pause. At least she can cook. Can she cook? She cannot cook, I said. Useless. But Amber was smiling. Norah said nothing. She stood, went to her room, and came back with Biscuit. She sat down and placed the dog in her lap and stroked his ears, and the stroking was her answer. She was here. She was not leaving. Victoria appeared in the hallway. She had been listening. Of course she had been listening. Her eyes were red again, but her chin was up, and her shoulders were straight, and she looked at each of them in turn and said nothing, and her nothing was louder than any speech. "Welcome to the circus," Amber said. Victoria kicked me in the shin, gently by her standards, which still hurt. The days that followed were an adjustment. That is the polite word. The real word was closer to controlled detonation. Victoria's morning stretches started at 5:30. Amber's breakfast prep started at 6. They met in the hallway like 2 weather systems colliding. Victoria complained about the cooking smells. Amber complained about the grunting. Norah moved through it all like a ghost with a dachshund, appearing and disappearing without friction. Eleanor visited 3 times that week. Each time she sat in the corner with her manuscript and observed the household like a naturalist documenting a new species. She took notes. I assumed they were about the novel. I was afraid to ask. Hannah drove Victoria to practice on Tuesday when I had a meeting. Victoria came back and said nothing about the ride, which from Victoria meant she approved. Hannah later told me Victoria had asked her 18 questions about my marriage to Clare and answered 0 questions about herself. The kisses became a logistics problem. Amber had established a rotation during the Karuizawa trip, and she enforced it with the discipline of a shift manager. Monday was Amber, Tuesday was Norah, Wednesday was Eleanor, Thursday was Hannah, Friday was now Victoria. Weekends were, in Amber's words, open negotiation. Victoria's first Friday arrived. She stood in the living room with her arms crossed and her face the color of a sunset. "This is stupid," she said. "Agreed," I said. "I am only doing this because the system demands it." "Understood." She grabbed my collar, pulled me down to her height, and kissed me once, hard, fast, then shoved me backward and walked away. Amber, watching from the kitchen doorway, scored it silently with her fingers. 7 out of 10. Victoria threw a couch cushion at her without turning around. That night, I sat on the couch after everyone had gone to sleep. Biscuit was curled on the rug with his nose tucked under his tail. The apartment was quiet for the first time in what felt like weeks. 5. I had 5 women in a trial girlfriend arrangement in an apartment that was designed for 1 person and a moderate amount of self-pity. Eleanor's letter was still in my jacket pocket. Amber's rooftop story was still in my chest. Victoria's decade of silence was still in the air. Norah's answer was a dog. Hannah's answer was 18 questions she had asked my stepsister about a marriage that had already ended. I did not know what I was building. A family, a disaster, a comedy that only worked because everyone in it was too stubborn to leave. Victoria had fallen asleep on the couch earlier, waiting for me to come back from a call with Walter about the upcoming print run. I had found her curled up with the television still on, her practice jacket pulled over her like a blanket that was not long enough. Her face in sleep was 10 years younger. It was the face of the girl in the hospital bed who had grabbed my hand and said, "Do not leave." I turned off the television. I pulled a real blanket from the closet and draped it over her. She did not wake up. I slept on the floor that night. Biscuit left his rug and came to sleep next to me, which I chose to interpret as solidarity. The apartment was full. The couch was taken. The floor was hard. I had never been less comfortable or more certain that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Hugo showed up on a Thursday with a manuscript folder tucked under his arm and a look on his face like a man walking into a sentencing hearing. He set the folder on my desk. Then he did not sit down. He paced to the window, turned around, paced back, and stood behind the chair he should have been sitting in. His fingers kept flexing. Open, closed, open. "Read it," he said. "Sit down, Hugo. I will sit down after you read it." I opened the folder. The title page was clean, no notes in the margins, which was unusual for Hugo. He normally annotated his own work like a man arguing with himself in a language only editors could decode. I read the first page, then the second. Then I stopped noticing pages. The writing had changed. His earlier books were technically impressive, controlled, every sentence doing exactly what it was told to do. This one breathed. The characters bled through the structure in a way his previous work had never allowed. Hugo paced. He went to the vending machine. He came back with a coffee he did not drink. He stood by the window and watched the street below as if the answer to whether his book was good might arrive by taxi. 4 hours. I read the entire manuscript without stopping. Not because I was being dramatic, because I could not find a place where the writing released me long enough to look up. When I set the last page down, Hugo was standing exactly where he had been an hour ago. Same coffee, same window, same expression. "This is a masterpiece, Hugo," he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. "You are just saying that. I have never told you that about anything. I let that land. I told you your last book was good. I told you the one before that was competent. I have never used the word masterpiece with you. This is a masterpiece." He did not speak for a long time. His jaw worked. His eyes went red. He turned toward the window so I would not see his face, but the reflection gave him away. "Okay," he said, very quietly. His voice had nothing in it except relief. 10 years of competing against a legend, and the only verdict he needed came from one person in a publishing office on a Thursday afternoon. I handed the manuscript back. "We publish this exactly as it is. I'm not changing a word." He took it, held it against his chest like a man who had just been told the test results came back clean. That was all he needed. The book launched on a Thursday. By Sunday, it sat at #1 in literary fiction, directly above the legendary author's new release. I found out because Hugo called me at 2 in the morning. I was on the floor beside the couch because Victoria still had territorial rights to the cushions, and Biscuit had chosen solidarity with me over comfort. The dog was warm against my shin. The apartment was dark except for the thin line of light under the bathroom door where someone had left the nightlight on. "Marcus." His voice cracked on the first syllable. "I see it," I said. I had already checked the chart before bed. He was crying, not the polite kind. The kind where the sound breaks apart in the middle and the person on the other end just breathes for a while because words are not available. "You were right," he managed. "I read it," I said. That was all the congratulation he needed. We stayed on the line for another minute without speaking. Somewhere on his end, I could hear the faint sound of a television still tuned to a late-night program and the occasional hitch in his breathing as the crying wound down. Then he hung up, and I set the phone face down on the floor. Biscuit shifted against my ankle. Somewhere in the apartment, one of the girls turned over in her sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the fact that the best thing I had done this month was sit in a chair for 4 hours and recognize something beautiful when it was in front of me. An editor's whole life distilled. Hannah asked for one day, just the two of us. No arrangement, no group, no rotation. She picked an amusement park and did not explain why. I said yes without asking questions because Hannah never asked for things, and the fact that she was asking meant it mattered more than anything she would say about it. She was waiting at the entrance in a plain white shirt and dark pants, hair down for once instead of pulled back in her usual working knot. She looked like a different person, not softer exactly, more like someone who had decided today was allowed. She had one hand on her hip and the other shielding her eyes from the sun, and when she saw me, she did not wave. She just waited, steady, the way she waited for everything. "Roller coaster first," she said. She was terrified of it. I could tell because she bought the tickets before I could speak, which is what Hannah does when she has decided to do something she does not want to do. She commits before her body can object. The climb was slow. The steel track ticked under us like a countdown. Hannah sat rigid with her hands on the bar and her eyes fixed forward. "This is fine," she said. Her knuckles were white. The drop hit and she screamed. Not a cute scream, a sound that came from somewhere deep and kept going for the entire 40-second descent while I gripped the bar and tried to remember how breathing worked. At the bottom, she was laughing. Wild, uncontrolled. Nothing like the Hannah who drove with both hands at 10 and 2. "Again," she said. She dragged me back through the line and we rode it a second time. She screamed again. She came to the roller coaster to beat it. That was very Hannah. She faced what frightened her by attacking it twice. I was beginning to understand that this was how she had handled her feelings for me for the last decade. The haunted house was her idea, which I found suspicious given what happened on the roller coaster. Inside, she grabbed my arm with both hands and did not let go. Her grip was strong enough that I lost feeling in my fingers by the second room. A staff member in white lunged from behind a curtain. Hannah's scream hit a register I did not know humans could produce. She spun me around and used me as a shield. "You're fine," I said. "I know," she said from behind my back. She did not let go. We moved through 3 more rooms. In each one, something jumped or crawled or made a sound, and in each one, Hannah crushed my arm a little harder and made a noise a little less dignified. By the final corridor, she had her face pressed into my shoulder and was navigating purely by holding on to me. At the exit, she collapsed onto a bench and put her hands on her knees. She was shaking. Her hair had fallen across her face, and she left it there, which was unlike Hannah. Hannah always fixed her hair. Right now, she was too busy remembering how to breathe. I sat next to her. The summer air was thick and sweet with popcorn and sugar from a nearby cart. "You were calm the entire time," she said, looking up at me through the curtain of hair. "Someone had to be." She laughed once, short and real. "That is why I picked you for this." She pushed her hair back. Her hands were still trembling, but she was smiling. It was the most unguarded smile I had ever seen on Hannah's face. The kind that arrived before the person wearing it could decide whether to allow it. The Ferris wheel was last. She did not say it was the reason we came, but the way she looked at it when we walked past earlier told me everything. We boarded alone. The gondola climbed in silence, and the park shrank below us until the screams from the roller coaster were just a faint hum. At the top, she looked out over the city. "Can I sit next to you?" she asked. I moved over. She sat beside me, and we watched the sun drop behind the skyline. Orange light poured through the glass and made everything look like a photograph someone had set on fire. She started crying, not dramatically, quietly, which was worse. Her shoulders did not shake. Her breathing did not change. Tears just appeared on her face, as if they had been waiting in line for years and finally reached the front. "I have been next to you for a year," she said, "in cars and restaurants, and that apartment with 4 other women, and I could not find a single day where you were only here with me." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. No tissue. Hannah never carried tissues because Hannah never planned to cry. "I have been waiting for 10 years, Marcus. I am not angry about it. I am just tired." The gondola swayed gently. The city burned below us. "I wanted one day," she said. "One day where you were only here with me. That is all I wanted." I did not have a clever response. I did not have a snarky one-liner. The editorial distance that I used to narrate my own life quietly packed its bags and left the gondola. "This day exists," I said. She looked at me. Then she looked back at the city. She wiped her face one more time. I reached over and took her hand. She did not flinch. She did not squeeze. She just let it happen, as if this was the one thing she had been waiting for that did not require her to be brave first. The Ferris wheel completed its rotation. Neither of us moved to get off. It went around again. The attendant at the bottom glanced up, smiled, and let us go. By the time we stepped out, the park was closing. The lights along the pathways had come on, and the crowd had thinned to couples and families carrying sleeping children. Hannah walked beside me with her arm through mine. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. The day existed. That was the point. I went to the estate for our regular manuscript session and found Eleanor wearing a full historical court costume, wig, embroidered robes, a fan tucked into the sash. She was cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by reference books with sticky notes bristling out of every edge, and she was writing so fast that her pen was a blur. I stood in the doorway for a long time. "The scene requires period accuracy," she said without looking up. "Sit down. The tea is on the left." I sat. The tea was in her usual thermos, expensive and faintly floral. She finished her paragraph, set down her pen, and looked at me with those red eyes, as if a historical costume was the most natural thing a person could wear on a Thursday afternoon. "You look like a portrait," I said. "Thank you. That is the point." I picked up her latest pages and started reading. The prose had improved again. It always did. Eleanor wrote like someone who was determined to understand the world by describing it precisely enough. After a while, she set down her pen. "May I ask you something personal?" "Yes." "When did you know you were happy again?" The question hit harder than I expected. Not because it was painful, because it was the exact question Eleanor would ask. Not, "Are you happy?" but "When did it happen?" because she needed the data point. She had been studying me the way she studied everything else, and this was the missing variable. I thought about it honestly. I am not sure I have a single moment. It came back in pieces. One morning, I woke up and Amber was burning pancakes, and Norah was reading on the couch with Biscuit on her lap, and Victoria was complaining about something from the next room. And I realized I was not dreading the day. I think that was when it started. She considered this, wrote something in the margin of her page. Then she nodded once and went back to her manuscript. 20 minutes later, she set her pen down again. "I have been studying the mechanics of being wanted," she said. The words came out precise and measured, the way they always did when she was saying something that cost her. "I understand what it looks like. I have read about it extensively. I do not always understand what it feels like from the inside." She folded her hands in her lap. The costume suddenly looked less like research and more like armor. Outside, a bird sang twice and stopped. The room was so quiet I could hear her breathing shift. "Could you simply hold me?" she said, without explaining why. I crossed the room and put my arms around her. She was smaller than I expected. The robes were enormous, and she was not. She did not move. She did not speak. She just breathed, and after a while, the precision in her shoulders dissolved, and she leaned into me like someone who had been standing for a very long time and had just been told she was allowed to sit. We stayed like that. The manuscript pages rustled in the draft from the window. The tea went cold. She did not ask for anything else. I did not explain. Eleanor's breakthrough was not a grand declaration. It was the moment she stopped analyzing and asked for the thing she actually wanted. And the thing she wanted was so simple, it barely made a sound. Solomon arrived while I was putting on my shoes to leave. He came through the entrance in his usual measured stride, nodded at me, and handed a folder to one of the black-suited staff. "Eleanor." He glanced at the costume. "Productive day." "Extremely," she said, and for the first time, I saw the faintest flush cross her face. Solomon turned to me. "Marcus, thank you for looking after her work. The manuscript is progressing well." He paused. Then, as if it were an afterthought, as if it were a remark about the weather, "I have been considering a seat in Nagatacho. The preparation is taking longer than expected, but it will come together." He said it the way he said everything consequential, quietly, as if arranging the most powerful position in the country were a mild scheduling inconvenience. I filed it. I did not know what it meant yet, but I filed it. Hannah was waiting in the car outside. When I got in, she was staring at the dashboard. "He said something about Nagatacho," she said. She had heard it through the open window. "Yes, that means something I do not know how to name yet." She started the car. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was set. Hannah recognized the weight of a sentence, even when she could not identify what it was carrying. The notification came on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee. A man had been struck and killed by a truck near a highway overpass. The article was 3 sentences. The name was Colin's. I read it. I set down the phone. I picked up my coffee. Colin had walked out of the processing facility 90 days earlier by the clock. By the calendar inside his own mind, it had been 32,400 years of the same loops. The truck was an accident. It was also the end of a sentence that had already finished running. I thought about the man he had been, the styled hair and the sharp jawline, and the confidence that was really just contempt wearing a good suit. I thought about the apartment, the women, the job he got through connections, and the way he seduced Clare out of spite because my competence offended him. Sam had warned me months ago that Colin was stripped of everything. The apartment, gone. The women, gone. The job, gone. His face, damaged by Sam's people. He had been living rough, homeless, wrecked in every direction a person can be wrecked. The 32,000 years inside the facility had broken whatever was left. All of that was gone before the truck. The truck was just punctuation. I drank my coffee. It was lukewarm. I drank it anyway. Biscuit wandered over and sat on my foot. He did that every morning now, as if checking that I was still there. From the kitchen, Amber's voice carried something about breakfast being ready in 5 minutes. Norah said something back that I could not make out, and Victoria's door opened with its usual creak. The apartment was full. The morning was ordinary. The man who had tried to take everything from me was dead on a road somewhere, and the world had not paused for even a second. There was no funeral listed. I did not look for one. The world had moved on. So had I. Norah had been quiet for 2 months. Not her usual quiet. That was baseline. This was different. She had been reading the same veterinary textbooks at the kitchen table every evening, turning pages with the kind of focus she normally reserved for Biscuit's feeding schedule. I noticed because noticing is what I do. The browser history on the shared tablet showed Hokkaido University's veterinary program page visited 11 times in 3 weeks. She had bookmarked the admissions requirements. She had bookmarked the campus map. She had bookmarked a ramen shop 2 blocks from the main gate. She brought it up on a Tuesday morning while I was pouring coffee. No buildup, No preface, just Norah, standing in the kitchen doorway with her hands folded over her stomach, looking at a spot on the floor about 2 feet in front of my shoes. "Would you come with me to Hokkaido?" she said. "There's an open campus at the university. I want to see it before I decide," she added, almost as an afterthought, "if it is not too much trouble." That was the same voice she used when asking for a second serving of rice. I set down the coffee pot, pulled up the airline site on my phone, had 2 seats booked before she finished explaining which weekend the open campus fell on. Her eyes went wide for exactly 1 second. Then she looked at the floor again and said, "Thank you." Biscuit sneezed from under the table. That was his version of applause. Norah had never been on a plane. This became obvious approximately 4 seconds after the engines started. Her hands found the armrests. Her knuckles turned white. Her jaw clenched in a way that made her look like she was biting down on something invisible. She stared straight ahead at the seat pocket in front of her with the intensity of someone memorizing it for a test. "The air pressure," she said, very carefully, "is unpleasant." It was not the air pressure. I had bought a cheap airport novel at the terminal gift shop. One of those mysteries where someone dies on page 3 and a retired detective solves it by page 200. I handed it to her without comment. She looked at it, looked at me, took it. By the time we were at cruising altitude, she was on chapter 4. Her grip on the armrest had loosened. Her breathing had steadied. She did not mention the air pressure again for the rest of the flight. Amber had apparently told her that 1 out of every 50 planes crashes. I was going to have a conversation with Amber about that when we got home. Hokkaido was different. I noticed it as soon as we stepped off the train in Sapporo. The air was drier, cooler, and the sky sat higher than it did in Tokyo. The roads were wider, the buildings were shorter. Everything had more room to breathe. Norah noticed it too. She stood on the platform staring out at the city, with her hands loose at her sides and her mouth slightly open, the way someone looks when they step into a room that is bigger than they expected. "The roads," she said, "they are so wide." We walked past the clock tower, which was smaller than either of us imagined and wedged between office buildings like a historical afterthought. Norah stared at it for a long time, tilted her head, and said, "It is trying its best." I almost laughed. She took photos. This was unusual. Norah was not a photo person, but she framed each shot carefully, checked the screen, adjusted, and took it again. 15 photos of the clock tower alone. "For Amber," she said when she caught me watching, "so she does not feel left out." We walked through a park after that, long and narrow, lined with trees that threw shade across the path in clean stripes. Benches every 50 meters. Norah said something about wanting to visit places like this someday with people who mattered, then went quiet and turned pink and walked faster for about 30 seconds. We found a ramen shop on a side street, the one she had bookmarked. She had printed directions and folded them into her pocket and carried them the way other people carry house keys. Essential, non-negotiable. Miso ramen, 2 bowls. She ate slowly, blowing on each bite, and at some point moved her stool 2 inches closer to mine without saying anything. I pretended not to notice. She pretended she had not moved. The afternoon felt like something we had borrowed from a simpler life. Wide streets, bad tourism, good ramen, no one expecting anything from either of us. Norah sent Amber a photo of the ramen. Amber replied with 14 messages in a row, the last one just the word jealous in capital letters. The hotel lobby was empty. Not Quiet Tuesday empty. Suspiciously empty. The kind of empty that happens when someone with enough money decides a building should contain exactly 2 guests and 0 strangers. The front desk staff bowed deeper than front desk staff normally bow. The manager appeared from a back room, introduced himself, and offered us an upgrade to the top floor suite with a tone that suggested refusing was not actually an option. I knew that tone. Solomon had been here first. Norah and I had just finished putting our bags in the room when the elevator chimed. The doors opened. 3 women stepped out. Amber was first. She had her arms crossed and her chin tilted up at an angle that communicated righteous indignation, territorial anxiety, and complete lack of shame about showing up uninvited, all at the same time. Eleanor was second. White hair, red eyes, perfect posture, carrying a manuscript folder as though this were a scheduled editorial visit and not a jealousy-powered cross-country ambush. Victoria was third. She was scowling at nothing in particular, which was her default state of being in any room she had not personally approved. "What a coincidence," Amber said, not even trying to sell it. I looked at them. Amber, Eleanor, Victoria. 3 different cover stories prepared in what I estimated was the 45 minutes between Amber checking my calendar and Solomon's jet lifting off the runway. "How was the flight?" I said. Amber blinked. "Fine. Eleanor adjusted her manuscript folder. Adequate. Victoria shoved her hands in her jacket pockets. I hate planes. Norah, standing slightly behind me, covered her mouth with one hand. I was fairly certain she was smiling. I called the front desk. Could we get dinner for 5, please? The manager said. Of course, sir, with the practiced calm of someone who had been told this exact scenario would happen. Dinner was chaos. The good kind. Amber had commandeered the largest sofa and was showing Norah the 14 photos she had taken of herself on the private jet, narrating each one as though it were a historical document. Eleanor sat at the dining table, editing her manuscript with a red pen, occasionally glancing up to correct Amber's grammar. Victoria had claimed the armchair nearest the window and was eating shrimp tempura with the silent focus of someone who had not eaten since Tokyo. We were worried about you, Amber announced, looking at me with an expression that dared me to challenge this. You were worried, Victoria said, without looking up from her tempura. I was bored. Eleanor turned a page. I had a publisher meeting in Sapporo. You do not have a publisher in Sapporo, I said. The meeting was canceled, she said, without missing a beat. Norah sat beside Amber on the sofa, showing her the clock tower photos. Amber zoomed in on each one, offered detailed critiques of the composition, and declared that Norah should have waited for better lighting. Norah nodded seriously and wrote this feedback down in her phone. I leaned against the kitchen counter and watched them. 5 people in a hotel suite in Hokkaido. 3 of them had flown 1,200 kilometers on a private jet because one of them had gone somewhere without permission. The hotel had been emptied by a man who controlled more of the country than most politicians. Hannah was working a convention back in Tokyo and had sent a message that said only, "Tell them I said hello. Do not let Amber redecorate the room." This was my life now. I had stopped trying to understand it and started trying to deserve it. The campus looked like a national park that someone had accidentally built a university inside. Wide paths cut through thick groves of trees. Ponds reflected the sky. The buildings were old and brick-fronted, set far enough apart that you could breathe between them. Norah walked half a step ahead of me. This was new. Normally, she walked half a step behind everyone. But here, on these paths, under this sky, she led. The veterinary building was older than the rest. Lower ceilings, worn floors, the faint smell of antiseptic and old wood. A student guide walked us through the facilities. The animal care rooms, the small animal surgery theater, the research wing where a dog was recovering from a procedure and lifted its head when Norah walked past the glass. She stopped, pressed her fingers against the window. The dog's tail moved once, a small movement, barely a twitch, but Norah saw it and her whole body softened. The tension she carried in her shoulders, the careful way she held her hands, all of it went quiet. He is doing well, the guide said. Post-surgery, 2 days ago. One of our students has been sitting with him every evening. Norah said nothing, but she did not move from the glass for a long time. Her fingertips stayed on the surface as though she could reach through it. She asked the guide 3 questions during the tour. What the acceptance rate was, how many hours of animal contact the first-year students received, whether there were opportunities to work with wildlife rescue programs. 3 questions. In the 6 months I had known this version of Norah, the one who lived in my apartment and read at my table and said fewer than 20 words on most days. I had never heard her ask 3 questions in a row about anything. The professor was a tall man with gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He spoke to the open campus visitors the way professors do, clearly, patiently, with the practiced warmth of someone who has explained the same thing 1,000 times and still means it. Someone asked what makes a great veterinarian. He thought about it for 3 seconds. Then he said, communication. Your patients cannot tell you what is wrong. You must be able to explain, reassure, negotiate with owners, with colleagues, with staff. The most technically skilled graduate I ever saw fail was someone who could not speak to people clearly. He was not talking about Norah. He did not know Norah existed. He was describing a general truth to a room full of 18-year-olds who still thought talent was the whole equation. But Norah heard it the way a person hears a sentence that has their name in it, even when it does not. Her shoulders tightened. Her hands, resting in her lap, curled inward. The brightness that had been in her eyes since we stepped onto this campus, the quiet, private brightness of someone finding a place that fit, went out. She did not ask any more questions. For the rest of the session, she sat perfectly still with her hands folded and her eyes focused on a point somewhere past the professor's shoulder. The brightness that had been building since we arrived on this campus was gone, replaced by something older, something she had carried with her from before I ever knew her, the quiet certainty that the world required a version of herself she could not produce. We walked out of the lecture room in silence, not her comfortable silence, the other kind, The kind that means someone has just measured themselves against a standard and come up short. I found a bench under a row of trees near the veterinary building, sat down. She sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, but not quite. She stared at the ground for a while. Then, "I think I am not right for this." I waited. "Communication," she said. The word came out like it weighed something. "That is the most important quality. And I am," she trailed off. She did not need to finish. We both knew. I leaned forward, rested my elbows on my knees, and looked at the path in front of us. Students walking in pairs, bikes locked to racks, a professor crossing the lawn with a stack of papers. "I used to write novels," I said, "a long time ago, under a pen name no one remembers." She looked at me. This was not what she had expected. I was not good at it when I started. The first manuscript I finished was 130 pages of a man walking through a city thinking about things. No plot, no dialogue, just a guy walking and thinking. The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile, just an acknowledgement. "The writers who made it were not the ones who started Talented," I said. "They were the ones who kept working after the talented ones quit. Communication is a skill, not a gift. You do not wake up with it. You build it the same way you build anything, one conversation at a time, badly, until one day you are doing it well enough that nobody remembers you were ever bad at it." She was quiet for a long time. A leaf fell from the tree above us and landed on the bench between us. "You really believe that?" she said, not a question. "I have edited 300 manuscripts," I said. "The pattern holds." She picked up the leaf, turned it over in her fingers, set it down on the armrest carefully, as though it mattered where it went. "I need more time to decide," she said. "You have exactly as much time as you need." She nodded once, looked at the campus stretched out in front of us, the brick buildings, the tree-lined paths, the sky that sat higher here than it did anywhere else. A student walked past us with a golden retriever on a therapy leash. The dog paused, sniffed toward Norah, and wagged once. She reached out and touched its ear with 2 fingers. The student smiled and kept walking. Norah watched them go until they rounded the corner of the veterinary building. Something in her posture changed, not resolved, not yet, but the door she had just closed cracked open again, and she did not push it shut. The last morning, the others were still asleep. Amber's door was closed. Victoria's shoes were still in the hallway, and Eleanor's manuscript pages were spread across the dining table in a formation that suggested she had been editing until 3 in the morning. Norah was on the terrace. She sat in one of the chairs with her knees drawn up, looking at the mountains. The light was coming in from the east, turning the peaks gold and leaving the valleys in blue shadow. Mist hung in the low places, like something the earth was breathing out. I sat beside her. We watched the mountains for a while, without speaking. Then she said, "I want to apply." I did not react right away. Not because I was surprised, because I wanted her to hear the words come back to her in the silence, rather than have them swallowed by my response. "I want to live here," she said, "by myself, study and work for it, and figure out who I am when I am not someone's quieter half." She paused. "That sounds selfish. That sounds like someone who knows what she wants." The mountain light was turning the mist to gold. A bird passed overhead, something large, unhurried, riding the thermal currents off the valley. "I will help you with the application," I said. I know. She did not hug me. She did not cry. She sat beside me on the terrace with her knees drawn up and her chin resting on them and looked at the place she had chosen, the mountains, the campus below them, the life she was building in her head, one room at a time. This was what she could offer right now, sitting beside me and letting me see the decision happen. No performance, no gratitude speech, just the fact of it, shared. There was something in my chest that was hard to name. Not sadness, exactly. Not pride, exactly. The feeling you get when someone you helped raise decides they are ready to leave, and you realize the only correct response is to let them. Biscuit was 1,000 kilometers south, probably sleeping on my pillow. Norah was here, choosing the farthest university in the country, and I was sitting beside her watching the sun come up over Hokkaido. The sky was enormous. I let it be. December came the way it always does in Tokyo. One morning, you reach for your jacket, and it is not enough. SR Bunko had 5 active series in national distribution. Hugo's latest had hit 20 reprints in 4 months. Eleanor's debut novel had been picked up for a manga adaptation, and the announcement email from the publisher had included the phrase fastest adaptation greenlight in company history. 2 more authors were in talks for anime deals. The office had outgrown its second set of desks, and Walter was already looking at the floor above us for expansion. I knew these things because I had built most of them. I knew them the way an architect knows the measurements of a building he designed. Precisely, dispassionately from the outside. Walter caught me at my desk after a call with an illustrator and slid a folder across the surface, the year-end bonus. I opened it, glanced at the number, and closed it. "That cannot be right," I said. He smiled. The kind of smile that made his reading glasses sit crooked. "It is right. You earned every digit of it." The number was double what I had made at my old company in a full year. I opened the folder again, stared at it, closed it a second time. "When I was at the old publisher," I said, "I once worked a 72-hour week to save a series from cancellation. The bonus that year was a handshake and a form letter." Walter put his hands in his cardigan pockets. "That company did not deserve you. This one does. Now sign the receipt and stop looking at me like I handed you someone else's paycheck." I signed it. He patted my shoulder once on his way back to his desk. I sat there for another minute, staring at the folder, and felt something I could not name. Not gratitude exactly, not pride. Something flatter, quieter, like hearing good news about a person you used to be. 2/3 of the bonus went to Norah's Hokkaido application preparation, tutors, exam materials, one more campus visit in January. The rest went into the household account. The money was not the story. SR Bunko going well was not the story. I had everything I had been working toward, and I was aware, in the precise way an editor notices a paragraph that does not move, that something in me was not moving either. Hugo asked to meet for drinks on a Thursday. He had been unusually quiet for the past 2 weeks. No manuscript panic, no midnight calls about chapter structure, no 7-paragraph texts about whether his protagonist's motivation was believable. For Hugo, silence meant either a breakthrough or a crisis. It was neither. It was something I had not prepared for. He was already at the bar when I arrived, not his usual hunched over the counter posture. He was sitting up straight, both hands around his glass, and there was something in his face I had never seen before. It took me a second to identify it. He looked settled, like a man who had finally found the chair that fit. "I am getting married," he said. No build-up, no preamble, just those 4 words, delivered with the same directness he used when telling me a manuscript was finished. I blinked. "To whom?" "My childhood friend. We reconnected at a reunion a few months ago. It went fast." He turned his glass in his hands. "She is the one, Marcus. I proposed 3 weeks in. She said yes before I finished the sentence." Something hit me in the chest. Not pain, not shock. Something older and harder to name. Like standing at a window and watching someone walk through a door you have been circling for years. "Congratulations," I said. My voice cracked on the second syllable. Hugo looked at me. I looked at my drink. Then I was crying. Not sobbing, not dramatic. Just tears, falling straight down, hitting the bar counter in small dark circles. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and could not stop. Hugo leaned forward. "Hey, are you okay?" "I am excellent," I said, which was a lie, and we both knew it. "I am happy for you. That is all." He studied me the way he studied a first draft, looking for the sentence underneath the sentence. Then he said very quietly, "That is not what I asked." I did not answer. He let it sit for a moment. Then he shifted gears, the way good friends do when they know the wall is there, and pushing will not help. "I have a favor," he said. "Can you give me some breathing room for the next few months? Less editorial pressure. The wedding planning is..." He made a vague gesture with both hands. "Of course. Take whatever time you need. Fans will wait. Walter will understand." His shoulders dropped. The tension I had not noticed left his body all at once, and suddenly he looked 10 years younger. His eyes went red. "I am glad you are my partner," he said. "Editor and friend." "I mean that." I nodded. We clinked glasses. The sound was small and bright in the warm, crowded bar. I was happy for him, genuinely, without reservation. But the thing that had hit my chest was still there when I walked home, and by the time I reached the apartment, I had identified it. It was not sadness. It was not envy, exactly. It was the recognition that Hugo had found the thing I was afraid to reach for. He had walked through the door. I was still standing at the window. Eleanor asked to meet on a Saturday. This was unusual. She normally sent manuscripts through the office system and saved in-person meetings for revision deadlines, but she had ordered a coffee and positioned herself at the window seat with her manuscript folder pressed against her chest like a shield, and I recognized the posture. Something was wrong. It was not wrong exactly. It was worse than wrong. It was doubt. Her new novel had been picked up for a manga adaptation. Her sales were climbing, and every metric said she was on the right trajectory. But Hugo's latest had outsold hers by a factor of 3, and that number had settled into her like a splinter. She held up a copy of Hugo's book. "I read it," she said. "It was very good." It was. Is my new work selling better than his? I could not tell her his exact numbers. That was confidential. But I could tell her the truth about hers. "Your numbers are strong. The manga adaptation is the fastest green light the company has ever had. You are doing well. I know, she said. She set the book down and stared at it. I know I am doing well, but he is doing better, and you are both of our editor. So what does that mean about me? There it was, the real question. It means you are two different writers with two different readerships. It means his genre is broader right now. It does not mean anything about your talent. She bit her lip. Her eyes went red. Then she stood up, took my handkerchief off the table, and said, "Excuse me, I need a moment." She came back 5 minutes later with dry eyes and a straight spine. She sat down, placed the handkerchief beside her coffee, and said, "I want to prove that you are an amazing editor, not through his numbers, through mine." I looked at her. This girl who had been rejected at 16, whose first manuscript had been thrown in the trash by a man who could not see what was on the page. She had rebuilt herself from that. She was still rebuilding. Do not abandon the current work to start something new, I said. Write both. Continue the series your readers love, and start the new project alongside it. You have a goal now. That is the hardest part. Her expression changed. The doubt did not leave. Doubt never leaves that fast, but something harder settled underneath it. Resolve, maybe, or just the refusal to be outdone. I will do my best, she said, so that more people can read our work. Our work. She said it like that, as if the books carried both our names. I could not look at her directly when she smiled. The brightness of someone moving forward is difficult to face when you are standing still. I knew that about myself. I was an editor. I could diagnose the problem in a manuscript from the first paragraph. I could see exactly where the story stalled and what it needed to move again. The manuscript was mine, and I still could not write the next page. Hannah and I ended up walking alone after a group dinner. The others had split off toward the train station, and she lived 4 blocks in the opposite direction. I offered to walk her. She said she did not need an escort. I said I was going that way anyway, which was not true, and she knew it was not true, and we walked. The cold was the kind that found every gap in your clothes. December in Tokyo does not announce itself the way winter does in the mountains. It just arrives, quietly, in the space between your collar and your neck. We walked half a block in silence. Then Hannah said, without turning her head, "Hugo is getting married. He told me. Are you envious?" The question landed like a stone in still water. I kept walking. I am happy for him. That is not what I asked. 2 people in 1 week, asking me the question behind the question. Hugo at the bar. Now Hannah on a cold sidewalk. I was beginning to suspect that the people around me could see something I was trying very hard not to look at. I do not know if I am envious, I said. I do not know what I am. She nodded once, slowly, the way she did when she was assembling her next words with care. I am turning 30 next year, she said. I have been in love with you for over a decade. I work for Solomon's security division. I live 4 blocks from the apartment where you sleep with other women. I have a career I built with my own hands, and a body that still works, and a face I am not ashamed of. She paused. And I am in a trial girlfriend arrangement with no end date, and I am running out of years I can pretend that does not matter. Her voice was steady, no anger, no tremor, just the facts, laid out with the same precision she used when reporting a security assessment. I said nothing for 10 steps. That is not a deadline, she added. I am not giving you one, but I need you to hear it. I hear it. Good. She walked another few steps. Now tell me why. Why what? Why you are stuck. You have 5 women who chose you. You have a company that values you. You have a bonus that could fund a wedding. You have everything you said you wanted when Clare left. So why are you standing in the same place you were standing 6 months ago? Clare. She said the name the way a surgeon names the organ. No softness, no sympathy, just identification. I stopped walking. She stopped with me. We were standing under a streetlight, and our breath made small white clouds that rose and disappeared. Clare broke something in me, I said. I know where the break is. I can see it. I am an editor. I can diagnose a broken narrative from the first chapter, but knowing where the crack is and sealing it are not the same thing. I exhaled. She was in bed with my colleague. 10 years of a marriage I thought was real, and it was not. And some part of me has not finished rebuilding the part that trusts. Hannah watched me. Her eyes did not soften. They sharpened. How much longer? She said. I do not know. That is the answer you gave me 6 months ago. It is the honest answer. She was quiet for another half block. Then she said, I am not giving you a deadline. I am telling you I see the break. Something moved in my chest. The same unnamed thing from the bar with Hugo, but warmer and more painful. That, I said, is the worst and the best thing anyone has said to me in months. Good. We reached her building. She turned to face me. The streetlight caught the sharp line of her jaw and the steady set of her shoulders. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had waited long enough to know the difference between patience and paralysis. I will wait, she said, but I need you to know that waiting is not the same as standing still. I am choosing to wait. That is different from being unable to move. She turned and walked through the door. It closed behind her with a soft click. I walked the rest of the way home alone. The streets were quieter now. A few taxis, a convenience store with its automatic doors sighing open for no one. The sound of my shoes on the pavement was the only consistent thing. December in Tokyo has a particular quality at night. The city does not sleep. It dims. The neon scales back. The salary workers have gone home. What is left is the infrastructure humming quietly to itself, and the cold and whatever you brought with you. I thought about manuscripts, specifically about the ones with missing chapters, the kind where you can see, structurally, exactly where the gap is. The story builds, the characters develop, the emotional arc reaches the point where the next chapter should land, and instead there is a space, a blank. You can see what it would say. You can feel the shape of the words that belong there. You know the beat, the rhythm, the payoff that the story needs, and the chapter has not been written. Hugo had written his, 3 weeks from reunion to proposal. A childhood friend who said yes before he finished the sentence. He had seen the gap, walked up to it, and filled it in one clean stroke. Hannah had written hers too, in a different way. She was not standing still. She had said it herself. She was choosing to wait. That was an action. That was a sentence on a page. I was the editor who could see every problem in every manuscript on his desk. I could tell Eleanor exactly what her novel needed. I could give Hugo the space to find his ending. I could support Norah's application to a university 1,000 kilometers away without flinching. And my own story had a gap in it that I circled every day, examining it from every angle, diagnosing it with professional precision. I knew the shape of what belonged there. I knew the words. I even knew the feeling. I had not written them. The apartment was warm when I walked in. Amber had left the hallway light on. Someone had put a blanket over the arm of the couch. Victoria, probably, because she was the only one who folded blankets into perfect rectangles. Biscuit was asleep on my pillow, which meant I would be picking fur out of my hair tomorrow morning. I stood in the hallway and listened to the building breathe. 5 women under this roof, a company that worked, a bonus in my account that could fund almost anything, and the warmest bath I had ever been in, slowly cooling by fractions I could measure but not feel. I took off my coat, hung it on the hook, walked to the bedroom, moved Biscuit gently to the foot of the bed, lay down. The ceiling was the same one I had stared at in every apartment I had ever lived in. Different paint, different cracks, same distance. I was going to have to write that chapter eventually. I knew that. Everyone around me knew that. Hannah had said it plainly enough that the cold air still carried the shape of her words, but not tonight. Tonight, the bath was warm and the ceiling was familiar, and the gap in the manuscript would be there tomorrow, unchanged. Patient, waiting for the sentence I had not yet found the courage to write. Amber texted me at 4:12. Not her usual style. No exclamation marks, no emoji, no guess what happened at work today. Just 6 words. Can you come pick me up? I was at SR Bunko reviewing a proof. I set it down, told the junior editor I would be back, and walked to the station. 12 minutes on the train, 6 minutes on foot. I did not run. I walked fast enough that the cold air burned the inside of my nose. The cafe owner let me in through the back. He was a big man, arms thicker than my thighs, and his face said everything Amber's text had not. She is in the break room, he said. She has been shaking for an hour. She was sitting at the staff table with a university nutrition textbook open in front of her. The pages had not been turned. Her fingers were pressed flat against the paper, knuckles white. Hey, I sat down across from her. What happened? She smiled. It was the worst smile I had ever seen on her face. Bright and mechanical, and completely empty behind the eyes. Nothing. Probably nothing. I just wanted to see you. She tried to laugh. It came out thin. I waited. There might be someone following me, she said. The textbook was still open to the same page. Her fingers had not moved. The cafe's espresso machine hissed from the other room and she flinched at the sound. This was Amber, the girl who had thrown Colin to the ground in a cafe, who had stared down her own stepfather without blinking, who had walked into my apartment at 16 and announced she was staying. This was the first time I had ever seen her afraid. When did it start? I asked. Last Tuesday, after closing. She pulled her hands off the textbook and folded them in her lap. I was locking up and someone was standing across the street, just standing there. The next night too, and the next. Did you tell anyone? She shook her head. I did not want to bother you. You have had a lot going on. I wanted to tell her she was an idiot. I also wanted to tell her I was sorry I had not noticed. Both things were true and neither would help. Come on, I said. I'm walking you home. I walked her home. She pressed close against my side, not the way she usually did, which was a half skip, half bounce, that treated my arm like a handrail at an amusement park. This was different. Her shoulder was jammed against my ribs, and she kept her head down. How long? I asked. A week, maybe longer, she swallowed. I kept thinking it was my imagination. It was not your imagination. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. How do you know? Because you do not scare easily. I put my arm around her shoulder. Her whole body was vibrating, very faintly, like a tuning fork someone had struck and then tried to muffle with their hand. You would not have texted me unless you were certain. She pressed her face into my jacket, nodded once. We kept walking, 3 blocks. I sensed it before I saw it. A presence behind us and to the right, half a block back, ducking behind a utility pole when I shifted my gaze. I did not turn my head. I pulled out my phone, pretended to check a message, and angled the camera backward. 1 photo. Dark coat, baseball cap, female build. Almost there, I said. We reached her building. The lobby door locked behind us and the presence faded. Amber turned and pressed her face against my chest and gripped the back of my jacket with both fists. I was scared, she said, very quiet. I was scared this whole time and I did not tell anyone. I know. I held her until her hands stopped shaking. Then I kissed the top of her head and said, "You did well. Now let me handle the rest." That night, I sent the photo to Solomon. No explanation, no text, just the image. His reply came in 40 minutes. 3 words, "We will handle this." 2 days later, Sam texted me. 2, not 1. Connected. I stared at the screen. 2 stalkers, both following Amber and me, both building files. I typed back, "Names?" The response was immediate. 2 names. I read the first and felt nothing. I read the second and my hand went still. I recognized it, not the name itself. The name was just letters on a screen, but the person behind it, someone who should have been long gone from my life, someone I had closed the book on. I set the phone on the table, made tea, drank it in the kitchen standing up, looking at the ceiling. The ghosts were not finished. Solomon arranged the meeting, not at the Qaeda estate, not at a police station, at the SR Bunko conference room, my territory, my table, my chairs. That was deliberate. Everything Solomon did was deliberate. Sam brought them in, 2 women, wrists zip-tied in front. Neither looked at the other. The first was Diane. I recognized her immediately. The same sharp features, the same rigid posture, except now the blazer hung wrong on her shoulders and her hair had strands escaping everywhere. She looked at me with the expression of someone who had rehearsed a speech and forgotten every word of it. The second woman said my name. I did not recognize her. She was gaunt, her cheekbones pressed against skin that had gone gray. Her hair was matted and her eyes were set deep in their sockets, in a way that made her whole face look like it belonged to someone 20 years older. She was wearing a coat I had seen before, dark, mid-length, with a loose button at the collar. The same coat she had worn to our divorce meeting at the cafe. That was what I recognized, not her, the coat. "Claire," I said, not a question, just a confirmation. The kind of thing you say when you are looking at something that used to be familiar and cannot connect it to what is in front of you. She flinched when I said her name, like she had been expecting it and it still hurt. Sam laid 2 phones on the table, hundreds of photos. Me leaving the apartment with Amber, me walking with Norah near the station, Eleanor arriving at my building with her manuscript folder, Hannah in the car outside, Victoria leaving in the morning in her track jacket. They were building a blackmail file, Sam said. Every relationship documented, every woman identified. They had enough for a media package. Who sent them? I asked. Sam looked at Solomon. Solomon looked at me. Colin, Solomon said. Before he entered the program, he left instructions, a set of prearranged orders triggered after 90 days. Both women received them independently. Neither knew the other had been contacted. I looked at the photos on the table. Months of surveillance. Every person I cared about, framed and cataloged by a dead man's contingency plan. Colin is dead, I said. Yes, Solomon said. His orders are not. Diane started to speak. I only followed the instructions because I believed there was a chance to what? I looked at her. She closed her mouth. Claire said nothing. She stared at the table. Her hands, zip-tied together, were perfectly still. Solomon straightened his folder. I will handle the disposition. Both will be dealt with through the network. You do not need the details. All right. I stood up. Looked at the 2 women one more time. Diane was shaking. Claire was not. That was the difference between them. Diane was terrified of what came next. Claire had already arrived at whatever place exists past fear. I left the conference room and went back to my desk. There was a proof waiting. I picked it up and started reading. Claire ran. She had always been fast when it counted. Fast to flee the apartment the night Marcus found her. Fast to block his number. Fast to assemble a new version of events that placed her at the center as victim. Running was what she did when consequences circumstances arrived. The car had slowed at an intersection. She had wrenched the door handle, thrown herself out, and rolled down the embankment toward the river. The impact broke something in her left arm. She felt it give, a clean snap above the wrist, and the pain arrived like white noise. She ran along the river path in the dark. Her arm hung wrong against her side. One place left, her parents. Whatever had happened between them, whatever words had been said, they would not turn her away. They were her parents. That was the one door that could not close. She arrived at the address at dawn. The house was gone. Not abandoned, not boarded up. Gone. An empty lot. The foundation had been broken apart and the rubble cleared. New grass seed had been scattered over the dirt. A plastic development notice was staked at the corner of the lot. The paperwork had been filed 6 months ago, processed this week. She stood on the sidewalk with her broken arm pressed against her ribs and stared at the grass seed. 6 months. Solomon had filed the demolition order 6 months before she had given him a reason. Every door was closing. Not slamming, closing quietly, in sequence, like someone walking through a house and pulling each one shut with both hands. The detective found her at a rest stop 30 kilometers outside the city. She was sitting on a bench near the vending machines, holding her broken arm against her chest. And she did not look surprised when he showed his badge. "I need help," she said. "There are people after me. Please." The detective, an older man, square-jawed, unhurried, nodded sympathetically. He reached for his handcuffs. Behind him, a black sedan pulled into the lot. Sam stepped out. "Dad," Sam said. "Son," the detective said. Claire looked between them. The handcuffs clicked shut around her good wrist. "Please," she said, "tell Marcus something for me. Tell him the message will not be delivered," Sam said. "Why?" Sam looked at her the way you look at a page you have already read. He already knows everything you would say. She opened her mouth, closed it, said nothing after that. Diane's punishment arrived in the science section of the newspaper. I almost missed it. It was a small article buried between a piece about deep-sea bacteria and a feature on satellite debris. Orbital research program. Long-duration human spaceflight study. First volunteer subject launched successfully from a private facility. No return date specified. I read the article twice, set the paper down, made tea. The woman who had fired me without listening to a single word of my defense, who had taken Colin's accusation at face value, who had signed the termination paperwork before lunch, who had then joined his blackmail scheme because she had nowhere else to go, was now orbiting the planet in a capsule the size of a closet. Solomon's voice had been the last thing she heard before the connection cut. I knew this because Sam had mentioned it in passing, the way you mentioned that a package was delivered. She had screamed. No one had answered. The monitor had gone dark, and beyond the small round window, there was nothing but the earth, blue and white, and impossibly far away, turning slowly like something that had already forgotten she was there. She would not be coming back within the time frame of anything that mattered. I drank my tea. Outside, the December sky was pale and clean. A closed manuscript. That was all. Another page I did not need to read again. Colin had died in the spring. I had not known the details at the time. Now I did. The program had lasted 90 real-time days. That was the sentence Solomon had arranged. 90 days in a facility that did not appear on any public record, overseen by a man in a white coat who answered to no medical board. The drug was the centerpiece. 1 injection per cycle. Each dose rewired the nervous system's perception of time. 1 real minute became 90 subjective days. The math was simple. I had done it myself, sitting at my desk with a calculator because I needed to understand the number before I could set it down. 90 days, 129,600 minutes. Each minute stretched to 90 days. The number that mattered was 32,400 years. 32,400 years of repeated loops. Each loop the same. Each loop ending the same way. He had stopped counting after what felt like the first 1,000 years. By the time they pulled the needle out for the last time, his hair had gone white. Not from age, from the nervous system burning through itself, trying to process centuries of input that the body had never evolved to contain. When they released him, he walked out the door in institutional clothes and wandered into the street. His eyes were hollow. His hands shook. He looked like something that had been left in water too long and pulled out shapeless. He had walked into traffic on a Tuesday morning. The truck driver did not see him until it was too late. There was nothing to identify except the institutional tag on his wrist and the white hair of a man who had lived longer than any human being was meant to live. The report said he was smiling when they found him. I did not know what to do with that detail, so I filed it away and moved on. Colin had framed me. He had slept with my wife to prove he could. He had arranged the stalking operation from inside his cell, leaving instructions like a will, ensuring his spite would outlive him. 32,400 years. I set the calculator down. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel pity. I felt the same thing I felt when I finished reading a manuscript that had gone on too long, a flat awareness that it was over and a need to stand up and do something else. Solomon poured the tea himself. He set the cup in front of me with the handle angled exactly to the right. There was a small plate of biscuits that neither of us touched. "It is done," he said. "I know." We sat with the tea between us. The estate was quiet. Somewhere in another wing, Eleanor was probably writing. Somewhere else, Hannah was probably checking a security rotation. The house ran like a manuscript that had been edited until every sentence served. "Thank you," I said. Solomon lifted his cup, sipped, set it down with the same precision he did everything else. "You are part of Eleanor's world. Protecting her world is what I do." I looked at him. "What about the parts of my world that are not Eleanor?" He considered this. Not a performance of thinking, the actual thing. His eyes were sharp behind those thin-framed glasses, and for a moment, I could see the machinery that ran beneath the courtly surface. The man who demolished houses, launched women into orbit, and arranged 32,000 years of punishment over a cup of tea. "I believe they qualify," he said. I nodded. We drank our tea. The lamplight was warm. Outside the window, the December garden was dark and still, every branch bare, every line clean. I had spent the last year pretending I did not know what Solomon was, that the funding was just funding, that the security was just security, that the demolished houses and the closed doors and the disappeared enemies were coincidences that happened to fall in my favor. That pretense was over. He was what he was. He did what he did. And the people who had tried to destroy my life were gone. Not metaphorically, not professionally, but actually and permanently gone from the surface of the world I lived in. I finished my tea, set the cup down. The handle was angled exactly to the right, the way Solomon had placed it. "I should get home," I said. Amber left the hallway light on. Solomon smiled. It was the smallest expression I had ever seen on a human face. Less a movement than a shift in temperature. "Give her my regards." I walked to the car. The December air was sharp and clean. Behind me, the estate lights dimmed one by one, each window going dark in sequence, like a man walking through his own house and putting everything in order before he turned in for the night. Solomon's people took Clare. I did not ask where. The hotel suite was on the 14th floor of a building I had never been to. Solomon had arranged it. The room was large and clean and smelled like nothing. No laundry detergent, no cooking oil, no trace of anyone's life. That was the point. I needed Amber somewhere that did not contain our history for a night. She walked around the room touching things, the curtains, the desk lamp, the minibar handle. She opened the closet and closed it. She turned on the bathroom light, looked at the mirror, turned it off. She was performing a version of being fine that she had practiced since she was 7 years old. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. She made it 11 minutes. Then she sat down next to me, put her hands flat on her thighs, and stared at the wall. "I was scared," she said, "the whole time, since before you came to the cafe, since before Sam caught them. I was scared every single day and I did not tell anyone." I did not say it was okay. It was not okay. "I know," I said. She turned her head. Her eyes were red but dry. "How?" "Because I have been reading you for months." I looked at her. "I am an editor. You learn to see what has been moved." She laughed. One sound, sharp and startled, like a cough. Then her face crumpled and she pressed her forehead into my shoulder and cried. I put my arm around her. She shook against me. Not the small, polite trembling from the cafe, but full-body sobs that made her ribs heave under my hand. She cried like someone who had been holding a door shut for weeks and finally let go of the handle. I did not say anything. I held her. The lamp hummed. The city was 14 floors below us, and none of it mattered. She cried until her breathing slowed and her weight settled fully against my side. Her fingers found the front of my shirt and held on. "Stay," she whispered. "I am not going anywhere." She fell asleep like that, sitting up, her head on my shoulder, her hand still gripping my shirt. I stayed awake and listened to her breathe. The room was warm. The city lights moved behind the curtains like something alive. In the morning, she would be Amber again, bright, fast, assembled. But tonight, she was the girl who had been afraid for weeks and told no one. And I was the person she chose to fall apart in front of. That meant something. I was not sure I deserved it, but I held on anyway. 2 days later, I was home. The hotel stay had ended. Amber had gone to Eleanor's to talk about the harem law news that had been dominating every screen for 48 hours. The apartment was quiet. Hannah was in the kitchen making miso soup. She had come by that morning. She did that sometimes. Showed up with groceries and cooked without being asked. She had a way of being in a room that made the room feel structurally sound. The sales numbers came in for Eleanor's 3rd volume, I said, setting my mug on the counter. 42,000 in the first week. Hannah nodded. She called me last night. She sounded different, less tense. She is getting better at trusting the work. She is getting better at trusting you. Hannah turned from the stove and looked at me with the expression she used when she was about to say something she had thought about for a long time. This arrangement makes more sense now. I fought it for months. You know that. I know. I do not fight it anymore. She set the ladle down. You are not the kind of man I expected, but you are the kind of man who shows up. I have been watching. That is enough. The miso was done. She poured 2 bowls. We sat at the counter and drank it without talking. The silence between us had stopped being uncomfortable somewhere around phase 9 and become something else entirely. The ease of 2 people who had stopped performing for each other. I did not know that Amber was in the hallway. I found out later what happened. Amber told me herself, weeks after the hospital, in a voice that was steady and dry and did not shake at all. She had come back from Eleanor's early. She was standing in the hallway with her bag still on her shoulder when she heard us. Hannah's voice, low and certain, saying the arrangement makes more sense now. My voice, quiet, agreeing. The sound of 2 bowls being poured. The silence that followed. The one that felt like agreement. She stood there for a long time. She looked at the kitchen doorway and she looked at the front door. The kitchen had warmth and miso, and a woman who could match me sentence for sentence. The front door had the street and the cold, and a clean exit that nobody would blame her for taking. She picked up her bag. She was at the door when Norah came around the corner from her room. Norah looked at the bag. She looked at her sister's face. She did not ask a single question. She took Amber's hand. No. Amber opened her mouth. No. Norah said it the same way both times. Not loud, not emotional, just a wall where there had been a doorway. The bag stayed on the floor. Amber's hand stayed in her sister's. Neither of them moved for a long time. Then Amber sat down on the hallway floor with her back against the wall, and Norah sat beside her, and they did not say anything else. They just sat. I was still in the kitchen. I did not hear any of it. 20 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. Eleanor was at the door. She had arrived in one of Solomon's cars, the big one, the one with the flags. She was not panicking exactly, but her composure had a crack in it that I had never seen before. She was holding her phone in both hands like a document that might catch fire. My grandfather, she said, has become prime minister. I looked at the phone. The live stream showed Solomon standing at a podium in the diet chamber, his white hair combed back, his posture the same as it was when he poured tea. The headline across the bottom of the screen said, Prime Minister Qaeda introduces polygamy recognition bill. Of course he did, I said. Hannah came out of the kitchen. She went very still. She looked at Eleanor. She looked at the screen. She looked at the far wall. He mentioned Nagatacho, Hannah said quietly. In phase 7, at the estate. I had a bad feeling about it. Amber was still in the hallway. She stood up. Norah stood up with her. Amber walked to where we were standing and looked at the phone over Eleanor's shoulder. She read the headline. She read it again. Then she laughed. The sound came out high and bright and slightly unhinged, the way laughter sounds when it arrives before you are ready for it. She put her hand over her mouth and her shoulders shook. We can get married, she said through her fingers. All of us. Legally. Then she cried. Not the way she cried in the hotel room. That had been exhaustion and fear. This was something else. This was the sound of a door opening that she had believed was permanently locked. Norah put her arm around her sister. Eleanor put her hand on Amber's shoulder. Awkward and precise. The way she did everything physical. Hannah stayed where she was by the kitchen doorway, arms folded, watching. I stood in the middle of my own living room and thought, Solomon became the leader of an entire country, so his granddaughter could marry me alongside 4 other women. I should have been shocked. I was not. The next part I had to reconstruct. The twins told me some of it. Sam told me the rest. Eleanor filled in the gaps months later, her voice precise and guilty for not telling me sooner. The law was real. The bill would pass. Solomon's coalition had the votes, but the law required parental consent for anyone under 21. Amber and Norah were 20. Harold was their legal stepfather. They needed his signature. Sam drove. Eleanor had offered him. Sam was the only person in Solomon's network who knew the route to the house in Azumino because he had mapped every address connected to the twins when Marcus first brought them into the apartment. He had prepared for this without being asked. That was what Sam did. Amber sat in the front seat. Norah sat in the back. Amber talked the entire drive, about the scenery, about the radio, about a restaurant they had passed. Her hands were in her lap, and they did not move. Norah said nothing. She looked out the window at the mountains getting closer. Sam asked once if they had told Marcus. No, Amber said. This is ours. Sam looked at her in the mirror. He did not argue. He drove. The mountains grew. The buildings shrank. The last train station they passed had no attendant and no bench. The road narrowed to 1 lane, and the pavement cracked under the tires, and the fields on either side were brown and dead from winter. Amber stopped talking. The house was exactly what they had described, and worse than I had imagined. A single-story wooden building, paint peeling in long strips from the walls. Wire cages stacked 3 high along the side of the house, and inside each cage a dog, thin, ribs showing, eyes dull and wet. The sound they made was not barking. It was a low, continuous whimper, like a machine that had been left running too long. The smell hit from 20 meters away, ammonia and rot, and something underneath that Amber later told me was the smell of animals that had stopped cleaning themselves. Harold was at the kitchen table, a bottle of cheap whiskey, half empty. His shirt was stained. He was a big man, not tall, but wide, with hands that looked like they had been made for a different purpose than what he used them for. He was not surprised to see them. Figured you would come back, he said. He did not stand up. His eyes moved from Amber to Norah and stayed on Norah. You need the signature. Amber stepped between his line of sight and her sister. We're getting married. We need your permission. Harold took a drink. He set the glass down. He looked at Amber the way a man looks at something he has already decided to break. You are getting married. He repeated it flat. To who? To the man we are living with, the teacher. Harold's mouth did something that was not a smile. The one you ran to, both of you, like I would not find out. Amber did not flinch. Sign the papers, and we leave. You never see us again. Harold stood up. He was faster than a drunk man should have been. His hand came across Amber's face with a sound like a book slamming shut. She went sideways. Blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. She got up. Sign the papers, she said again. Same voice, same words. He hit her in the stomach. She doubled over. He hit her face again, and she went down. And this time, she stayed down on one knee, her hand on the floor, her hair hanging over her eyes. Norah was shaking. Every part of her was shaking. Her hands, her jaw, the tendons in her neck. But she did not run. She stepped forward. Stop. Her voice was barely a sound. I will do anything. Just stop hitting her. Harold looked at Norah. The thing in his eyes was not anger. It was something older than anger, and worse. Anything, he said. Norah nodded. He put his hand on her shoulder. He turned her toward the stairs. Amber's phone was in her coat pocket. It had been recording since they walked through the door. Her hand did not shake when she pressed it on. It did not shake now, but her voice broke. Marcus. She said it into the room, not into the phone. Not as a call, as a prayer, Eleanor told me. Not immediately. She waited 20 minutes after the twins left with Sam before calling me. She told me later she wanted to give them a head start, wanted to respect their decision to go alone. Then she looked at the kitchen table where Amber's cereal bowl was still sitting and picked up the phone. They went to Azumino, she said, to their father's house for the signature. I did not ask why she waited. I did not ask for the address. Sam had sent it to me 3 months ago, unprompted, in a text that said filed and nothing else. I had saved it without knowing why. I took my keys and left. The drive was 3 hours. I did it in 2.5. The highway narrowed outside of Matsumoto, and the mountains closed in on both sides, and the light bled out of the sky like something being drained. I did not think about what I would find. I thought about Amber at 7 years old on a rooftop. I thought about the version of her that a young cram school teacher talked down from the edge with nothing but his voice and the fact that he showed up. She had told me that story, and I had carried it for months. Now she was in a house with the man she had run from, and she had gone there because of me, because the law required his name on a piece of paper so she could marry me. I drove faster. The road was dark. The mountains were dark. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through both. The front door was unlocked. I came through it fast. The hallway was narrow. Yellow light from a bare bulb. The smell hit me like a wall. Ammonia, whiskey, something sour underneath. Harold had Norah by the arm. They were 3 steps from the stairway. His hand was on her shoulder. She was not resisting. Her face was turned away from him and her eyes were closed. Amber was on her knees by the kitchen table, blood on her lip, blood on the floor. Her phone was in her hand, screen glowing. I crossed the room. 3 steps. I did not count them at the time. Sam told me later. 3 steps and my hand was on Harold's collar, and I pulled him backward, and he hit the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Norah stumbled free. She fell against the opposite wall and slid down it. Her eyes were open now. Amber stood up. She held her phone out so Harold could see the screen. 12 minutes of footage. His face went through 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, denial, calculation, and finally something that looked like the inside of a trapped animal. That is you hitting me, Amber said. Her voice was steady. Her lip was still bleeding. That is you taking my sister to the stairs. That is 12 minutes of evidence that ends your life. Harold looked at the phone. He looked at me. He looked at the hallway behind him. He went to the kitchen. He came back with a knife. A kitchen knife. Long, slightly curved wooden handle dark with grease. This is my house, he said. The words were thick and wet from the whiskey. You broke into my house. I put Amber and Norah behind me. Get behind me, I said. They moved. I felt their hands on my back. One of them was shaking. Both of them were shaking. Harold raised the knife. His hand was not steady, but his eyes were clear. That was the dangerous part. Not the drunk, but the sober calculation behind it. He knew what the recording meant. He knew what the law would do. He was deciding whether the knife changed the math. I looked at him. In my past life, the one before the divorce, before the twins, before any of this, I would have stepped back. I would have calculated the safest exit. I would have been reasonable. I stepped forward. The blade went in below my ribs. It was hot, then cold. Harold's face changed. The calculation left his eyes, and what replaced it was the white, hollow look of a man who has crossed a line he cannot uncross. I did not step back. I looked down at the handle against my shirt. Then I looked at him. "There is your sentence," I said. The recording was still running. Amber's phone captured everything. The strike, the entry, my voice, Harold's face. Attempted murder, recorded, witnessed, on top of assault, and the threat against Norah. No plea deal in the world would save him. I turned my head. Amber and Norah were behind me. Amber's hand was over her mouth. Norah's face was white. "You are free now," I said. The front door crashed open behind us. Sam. He was across the room in 4 strides. Harold went down with a sound like furniture hitting the floor. Sam's knee was on his back, and his hands were behind him before the knife finished clattering across the tiles. My legs gave out. I went to my knees, then my hands. The floor was cold against my palms. The yellow light from the bulb above me was getting brighter, which meant something was wrong with my eyes. Amber was next to me. Her hands were on my face. She was saying something. I could hear her voice, but not the words. Norah was on my other side. She was not saying anything. She was pressing something against my side, her cardigan folded, pushing hard. Her hands were steady. The shaking had stopped. Sam was already on the phone. His voice was flat and professional and very far away. "Ambulance to the following address. Stab wound. Conscious but fading. 1 suspect in custody." The yellow light was very bright now. Amber's face was close to mine. She was crying, but her hands were steady on my cheeks. I wanted to tell her something. That the knife was calculated. That the wound guaranteed the arrest. That I had done the math in the 2 seconds between Harold picking up the blade and Harold reaching me. A stabbing, recorded on video, with witnesses, on top of prior assault and attempted sexual assault, was 20 years minimum. Not the 5 or 6 he might have gotten for the domestic charges alone. I wanted to tell her I had chosen it, but my mouth was not working properly, and the light was very bright. And the last thing I saw before it went white was Norah's hands, steady and still, pressing her cardigan into my side like she was trying to hold me together. She was. The ambulance arrived in 14 minutes. Sam had called Solomon's network before dialing emergency services. The helicopter was already airborne from Matsumoto. They loaded me onto a stretcher. I was told this later. I do not remember the stretcher, or the ambulance, or the helicopter. I remember the yellow light and Norah's hands, and then nothing. Amber rode in the ambulance. She held my hand the entire way. The paramedic asked her to move twice, and she did not move. Sam told me this. Norah stayed at the house. She stood in the doorway and watched them take Harold to the police car. She watched until the lights disappeared down the dark road. Then she went to the dog cages in the yard and started opening them, one by one, with hands that did not shake. Sam found her sitting in the frozen grass with 7 emaciated dogs pressing against her legs, crying into the fur of a brown mutt that was too thin to stand on its own. He sat next to her. He did not say anything. He took off his suit jacket and put it around her shoulders. The police came back for the animals an hour later. Norah would not leave until every cage was empty. Sam drove her to the hospital at midnight. She walked into the waiting room and found Amber asleep in a plastic chair with mascara tracks dried on her face and my blood on her hands. Norah sat beside her sister. She pulled Sam's jacket tighter around her shoulders. She did not sleep. She sat there all night, watching the surgery light above the double doors, and she waited. I came back in pieces. The darkness thinned slowly. My side hurt. My throat was dry. There was a ceiling above me, white, institutional, 1 fluorescent panel switched off, so only the daylight came through. Hospital, right. I turned my head. The pain answered immediately. A hot wire pulled tight from my ribs to my spine. I breathed. I waited. The room assembled itself around me. Amber was in the chair closest to the bed, arms crossed, eyes red, medical tape on the corner of her lip where Harold had split it. She was not sleeping. She was watching me with the expression of a woman who had rehearsed exactly what she was going to say. Norah stood at the window, her back to me, wearing Sam's jacket over her blouse with the sleeves past her fingertips. When the sheet rustled, she turned. Her mouth opened, her eyes filled, and she pressed both hands flat against her thighs as if physically holding herself in place. Eleanor sat at the foot of the bed with a folder she was not reading. Hannah was beside her, checking a clipboard she had clearly taken from the nurse's station. She had spoken to the surgical team, reviewed the chart, and organized a visiting rotation before I opened my eyes. That is what Hannah does. She does not worry. She prepares. Victoria was in the corner chair, silent. Posture exactly the way she sat on the bench during timeouts, contained, controlled. But her cheeks were wet. She had not wiped the tears because wiping them would mean admitting they were there. 5 women, all present, all exactly themselves. I am an editor. I have spent my career redlining manuscripts where the hero wakes surrounded by the people who love him. It always felt cheap on the page. Too easy. It did not feel easy. It felt like something I had earned with a knife wound and a 3-hour drive and 10 years of learning what the wrong woman looked like so I could recognize the right ones. Amber stood up. She walked to the side of the bed and looked down at me the way she looked at overdue homework. You drove 3 hours alone. You did not call Sam. You walked into that house without a weapon, without backup, and when a drunk man came at you with a knife, you stepped into it. She paused, not for breath, so I could feel the weight of what came next. Do you have any idea what it feels like to hold someone's face while their blood is spreading across the floor? I looked at the tape on her lip, the bruise deepening to purple on her cheek. You're both free, I said. She stopped. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. From the window, Norah spoke without turning. We know. 2 words. Final. The same voice that had said no in the apartment hallway. Amber sat back down. Her fingers found the edge of the sheet, then found mine. She did not say anything else. Neither did I. Hannah came back alone later that day. The others had gone. She pulled the chair to the bedside and sat the way she always sat, straight, shoulders square. I found your books by accident, she said. No preamble. She had been waiting to say this. 7 years ago, I went to a used bookstore in Conda because I needed something to read on the train. I saw a name I recognized from an editorial journal. 3 volumes, out of print. I bought all of them. She paused. Her hands stayed folded. Then I read them, and I knew why. I went back 3 weeks after I saw them on your shelf, I said. I checked they were still there. I know, you know? The second volume was turned spine out when I left. When I came home, it was spine in. Her eyes were steady. You push books in when you read them. You do it with every manuscript too. I noticed. I am an editor. She noticed the thing an editor does. Good, she said. She picked up the chart from the wall and started reading it properly. The conversation was over. Everything that needed 10 years to be said had been said in 4 exchanges. 2 days later, a knock at the door. The woman in the doorway was small. She had the twins' bone structure, the same cheekbones, the same wrists, but hollowed out, as if something had been subtracted from her over 20 years. Dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. She looked at the girls. She looked at me. Then she lowered herself to the floor. Not a bow, a full prostration, forehead against the linoleum. I am sorry, she said. Her voice cracked on the second word. For what happened to you in that house. For what happened to my daughters. For all of it. Amber's apple stopped halfway to her mouth. Mom, she said. The woman did not stand. She spoke into the floor. He was going to hurt them. I saw the way he looked at Norah when she was 14. The way his eyes followed her. Her voice had the steadiness of a confession rehearsed for years. I could not leave. No money, no family, no papers that would let me take them. So I made them hate me. I stopped being kind. I stopped saying goodnight. I made myself so cold they would want to run. The room was very still. Amber mentioned you once, a teacher at the cram school who sat beside her when she cried. I tracked the school's records until I found you. I checked that you were safe. And when they left that house, I let them go. Because they were going somewhere I could not give them. Amber was off the bed, on the floor beside her mother, both arms wrapped around the smaller woman. Norah moved more slowly. She set her textbook on the windowsill. She walked across the room. She knelt. Her mother reached for her, and then the 3 of them were on the floor together, and none of them were speaking. I watched from the bed. I am an editor. I recognize when the missing chapter finally arrives. The gap in the story that made everything feel slightly wrong. The backstory that explained the inexplicable. Every vague reference. Every deflected question. Every time the twins said our parents and changed the subject. All of it was reframed in a single speech delivered from the floor of a hospital room. She had not abandoned them. She had launched them. The proposal started that afternoon. I could not get out of bed. The wound was healing, but Hannah's tone when she relayed the surgical team's instructions was not optional. So I did it from the hospital room. 5 families, 5 conversations. The twins' mother went first. She was still in the room. I said, I want to marry your daughters, both of them, under the new law. She looked at Amber. She looked at Norah. She looked at me. Anyone who pays that price for my children does not need my permission, she said. But you have it. Amber squeezed my hand so hard the IV pinched. Solomon came that afternoon. He entered the way he entered every room, quietly, precisely, as if the building had been expecting him. dark suit, thin-framed glasses. The folder in his hand could have been hospital paperwork or a constitutional amendment. "I would like to marry Eleanor," I said, formally, "under the law you made possible." Solomon removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. Then he stood. "Father-in-law," he said carefully, as if examining the word for the first time. His voice broke on the second syllable, the way a bridge gives, at the point you did not expect. Then Solomon laughed, not a quiet laugh, the laugh of a man who changed the law of a country for his granddaughter, and it worked. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely, yes." He shook my hand. He held it for a long time. When he let go, his eyes were bright behind the glasses he had just cleaned. I called Sam next. He listened without interrupting. Then a silence long enough for the clock to tick twice. "If the arrangement fails," Sam said, "what happens to my sister? She stays. She was here before any of them. She is not an addition. She is the foundation." 3 seconds of silence. "I will tell our parents." The line went dead. Sam did not say goodbye. The silence was the blessing. My father came last. He had been sitting in the hallway for 3 days. The nurses told me. 6 hours a day in a plastic chair, not speaking to anyone. He came, he sat, he left. He came back. On the 3rd day, I asked the nurses to send him in. He was older than I remembered, thinner. The hair I remembered as dark was gray at the sides. He wore the same kind of plain jacket he had always worn. Nothing expensive, nothing cheap, just the uniform of a man who spent his life not drawing attention. He sat. He looked at the bandage. He looked at his hands. "Your mother would have liked this," he said. He did not specify what this meant. He did not need to. The room full of women, the 5 families, the law that made it possible. "I would like to marry Victoria," I said. "She is not my blood sister. She has loved me since she was 10 years old, and I was too stupid to see it. I see it now." He looked at me with the same quiet eyes from every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every time I brought home a manuscript and asked him to read the first page. "Yes," he said. He put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, left. My father has never needed more than one word when it was the right one. 2 weeks after I left the hospital, I met Hugo at a cafe near the office. He was already there, same corner booth, coffee half empty, which meant he had arrived early out of nerves. The anxious energy that always vibrated in his posture had settled. Marriage was doing something to him, a steadiness in his shoulders that had not been there 6 months ago. "You look terrible," he said. I was stabbed. That explains it. I sat down, ordered a coffee, took a sip, set it down. There was something I had been carrying for years, since the night I put 3 manuscripts in a drawer and let Gerald's voice win. Since I told myself that an editor was close enough to a novelist, it was not close enough. It had never been. "I want to write again." I said it flat. The way I told authors their work was a masterpiece. The way I told Clare the marriage was over. No decoration, no qualification, a fact. Hugo set his coffee down. He looked at me for a long time. The cafe noise filled the silence. Grinder, chairs, someone laughing 3 tables away. He extended his hand across the table. "Then we are rivals," he said. I took it. His grip was firm. Mine was firm. "We are going to surpass the legend," he said. "Both of us. And I am going to beat you." "You can try," Hugo grinned. It was the same grin from our university seminar, the one where the professor called his story brilliant, and he looked terrified instead of proud. Still terrified, still brilliant, and now he would not be alone. Hannah was at a table across the room. She had come with me, ordered her own coffee, and waited with the patient discipline of a woman who understood that some conversations need to happen between 2 people. I sat down across from her. She studied my face the way she studied charts and schedules, with complete attention and no hurry. "You are finally smiling," she said. I touched my face. She was right. "I noticed," I said. "Good." She picked up her coffee. I picked up mine. Somewhere in this city, Amber was at work. Norah was studying. Eleanor was writing. Victoria was at practice. Solomon was running a country. My father was in a quiet room, needing only one word. And Hannah had kept 3 out-of-print novels on her shelf for 10 years because she noticed the thing an editor does when he reads. She always believed. The hole in my chest was gone. Not filled, not patched, gone. As if the emptiness had been a draft that was never supposed to end that way, and someone had finally written the real version. I was not there yet, not fully. The novel was not written. The marriages were not performed, but I could feel the distance shrinking. And for the first time in 10 years, I was not afraid of what I would find when I arrived. The mansion was absurd. I knew this because I had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner, because my last address before this one had been a modest flat where 5 women slept in shifts, and because the front hallway alone was larger than the entire SR Bunko office. Solomon had shown me the floor plan on a folded piece of paper the size of a restaurant menu, and I had counted rooms until I lost track somewhere past 20. 1 year. It had been 1 year since the hospital room, since the knife wound that was now a faint silver line below my left ribs, since 5 conversations in a hospital bed that turned into 5 ceremonies in the mansion's garden over the following spring. March again. The cherry blossoms outside the gate were doing what cherry blossoms do, being beautiful on a schedule, as if the world had an editorial calendar. Eleanor was 5 months along now, a boy, and she edited her novel in the room next to my office with the door open so I could hear her pen scratching corrections. Hannah was 7 months, a girl, and she had reorganized the entire second floor into a system only she fully understood. Neither of them complained. Both of them glowed. The morning was organized by Hannah. This was not negotiable. She had posted the household schedule on a whiteboard in the kitchen with color-coded columns, one per wife. And if anyone deviated, she would know because Hannah always knew. Amber contested this daily on principle. Victoria ignored it because practice started when practice started, and the schedule could adapt. Norah followed it to the second, because Norah followed every structure she trusted. I stood at the bottom of the staircase in the entrance hall, coffee in hand, an editor at home, an editor-in-chief technically, but I still thought of myself as the man who noticed when things had been moved. My office was on the second floor, 3 walls of bookshelves, a wide desk that Solomon had insisted on, real walnut, older than I was, and a view of the garden where a koi pond caught the light every morning at exactly 9:15. I knew it was 9:15 because I had watched it happen every day for 6 months. SR Bunko had been promoted, national level publisher under Kaida Holdings. The label I had joined when it was 3 people in a rented room now had 42 staff, a distribution deal with every major bookstore chain, and 3 authors on the annual bestseller list. I worked from this office 2 days a week. The other 3 I took the train to the SR Bunko building in Shinjuku, where my name was on the door of the editor-in-chief's office, because Walter had decided to retire. He did it the way he did everything, without ceremony. Called me into his office on a Tuesday, handed me a folder, and said, "The label is yours. I built it for someone like you. Now I am going to read books that are not manuscripts." He shook my hand, picked up the cardboard box he had already packed, and left. I did not make a speech. He did not want one. Some men build things so that other men can live in them. Walter was that man, and the best tribute I could offer was to be worth what he handed me. I opened my laptop, 2 meetings before noon, then an afternoon of reading submissions from new authors, the part of the job I still loved more than any other because it was the part that mattered. Someone, somewhere, had written a first manuscript that was going to change their life if the right editor found it. I intended to be that editor. Clare had been awake for what felt like days. The box was 120 centimeters on each side. She knew this because the old man on the monitor had told her the first time, in a voice so calm it did not belong to the sentence it was saying. 120 centimeters. She could not stand. She could not stretch her arms. She could sit with her knees drawn up and her forehead against the wall, and that was the full range of her world. The monitor had gone dark a long time ago. The air holes along the top edge let in a thin current that smelled of rust and engine exhaust. The box moved. She could feel it. The vibration of a vehicle, the sway of turns, the occasional jolt that knocked her shoulder against the side. She had stopped screaming, not because she had accepted anything, because screaming used water she did not have. In the silence, a different kind of sound came up from inside her. Not words, not thoughts, just a name, surfacing the way a bubble surfaces in still water. Marcus. She did not know why. He was not coming. She knew he was not coming because he had stopped coming a long time ago, the day he slid the divorce papers across the table and did not look back. The name came up anyway. It came up the way rain falls on a building that has already burned down. Pointless. Automatic. The last reflex of a woman who had run out of everything else to call. She called his name one last time. He was at home. He did not hear it. No one did. 6 months later, September, Amber was the first one out the door every morning. This had not changed in the year since she started culinary school. She woke before anyone except Hannah, made her own breakfast because accepting someone else's cooking was a professional insult, and appeared at the front entrance with her bag on her shoulder and her knives wrapped in a roll under her arm like a samurai who happened to also make excellent eggs. "I am leaving," she said. She always announced it, not because anyone needed to know. Hannah's schedule already tracked her departure, but because Amber did not leave a room without marking the exit. I was at the door, coffee in hand, the same spot I stood every morning because I had learned, over 12 months, that the 3 departures were the structure of my day, and I did not want to miss any of them. She stopped in front of me, bag on shoulder, knives at her side. The bruise on her cheek had faded a year ago. The medical tape was a memory. What was left was a woman who walked out the front door of a mansion every morning to go learn how to cook better than she already cooked, which was better than most people would ever cook. She kissed me, not on the cheek the way she had that first morning when I left for SR Bunko, pretending it was an accident, blushing so hard her ears turned pink. On the mouth, brief, warm, ordinary, the kind of kiss that means I will be back tonight and I am not worried about it. Try not to burn down the kitchen while I am gone, she said. I do not cook. Exactly my point. She walked down the gravel path. Her steps were quick and sure. I watched her until the gate. She did not look back. She did not need to. Norah was next, always next. She came down the hall with her bag and her admission letter folded in her coat pocket. Chobi's travel carrier was in her left hand. The dog had adapted to the train the way Norah had adapted to everything, silently, completely, without complaint. He sat in the carrier with the patience of an animal who trusted the person holding the handle. Hokkaido University, veterinary program. She took the train north at the start of every semester with Chobi and came back for holidays with research notes and a quiet pride she would never describe, but that I could read in the way she held her shoulders, straighter, like she had found something worth standing up for. She stopped at the door. She looked at me. I will come back for the holidays, she said. I know, and I will call. I know. Do not let anyone touch my room. Your room is yours. She nodded. The same nod she had given me in a hospital hallway when she said, we know. One motion, final. She turned and walked down the path. Her steps were measured and her back was straight, and she walked in front of her own shadow for the first time in her life. Not behind anyone, not half a step to the side, in front. I stood at the door until the gate closed. Victoria came last. She came last because Victoria operated on her own schedule, and Hannah's whiteboard was a suggestion she chose to acknowledge roughly half the time. She had her sports bag over one shoulder and her university jacket zipped to the chin. Basketball scholarship, professional track program. She had been scouted during her first semester after a practice game where she scored 28 points and argued with the referee about a call that was correct. The scouts wrote in the margin of their evaluation, elite competitiveness, above average court vision will require management. She framed that note and hung it in her room. She stopped at the door, looked at me, then kicked my shin. Ow, that is for looking sad when Norah left. I was not. She hugged me, hard. The kind of hug that crushed the air out and said everything the kick could not. Her face pressed against my chest for exactly 2 seconds. Then she pulled back, punched my shoulder once, and walked out. I am going. I noticed. Stop staring. It is creepy. I watched her anyway. She walked down the path the way she walked onto a court, head up, shoulders square, absolutely certain that the next thing that happened was going to go her way. She did not look back either. None of them looked back. That was the best part. They did not need to. The house was quiet after they left, not empty. Eleanor was in the next room. I could hear her pen, the red one, the one she used for final pass edits on her own manuscript. She had published her second novel 3 months ago. The reviews said what I already knew, that the woman who wrote period court dramas with the precision of a historian was becoming a voice that mattered. I leaned into the doorway. She sat cross-legged on a cushion with pages spread around her in a semicircle. Her white hair fell across the manuscript she was marking. The pregnancy had softened her posture, but not her standards. The page in front of her had more red ink than black. Chapter 11 has a pacing problem, she said, without looking up. Your chapter 11 or mine? She lifted her head, red eyes, the faintest trace of a smile. Yours. You rushed the pivot. The reader needs one more sentence before the reversal, or they will not feel it. I took the note. She was right. She was always right about pacing. I had been her editor before I became her husband, and the hierarchy of competence had not changed. Hannah appeared at the far end of the hallway, 7 months along and still moving with the deliberate efficiency of a woman who had reorganized a mansion. Lunch is at noon, she said. Both of you. Both of us, I said. She nodded once and disappeared. The schedule would be followed. The house would run. The children would be born into a structure that Hannah had built before they arrived, because that is what Hannah does. She does not hope for the best. She prepares for everything. Solomon brought the book home on a Tuesday. He came through the front door the way he always did, quietly, as if the mansion and the man who built it had an understanding about volume, and set a package on the kitchen table without a word. Brown paper, string tied in the old way. His name was not on it. Neither was mine. I was making tea. Hannah was reviewing tomorrow's schedule. Eleanor had her manuscript pages spread across her end of the table, pen in hand. Victoria had come back from practice an hour ago and was eating rice from a bowl the size of a small planet. Solomon sat down, adjusted his glasses. Open it, he said. I untied the string, folded back the paper. It was a book. My book. The advance copy. delivered before it reached a single store shelf, because Solomon had connections that operated outside the normal supply chain in the same way he operated outside the normal definition of grandfather. The cover was clean. The title was mine. The author name on the spine was the pen name I had buried in a drawer 10 years ago when Gerald told me writing was worthless. Eleanor put down her pen. She picked the book up before I could. She opened it to the first page, read. Hannah came around the table. She did not take the book. She read over Eleanor's shoulder. Her hand rested on the back of the chair. Victoria stopped eating. She looked over Eleanor's other shoulder. Is that your book? Yes. The one you were writing in the evenings when you thought nobody noticed? I did not think nobody noticed. I knew everyone noticed. I hoped nobody would mention it until it was finished. Solomon sat at the head of the table. He watched his family read the book, the way a man watches a building he designed being lived in for the first time. He had built the world. They were living in it. The expression on his face was the quietest kind of joy. Not surprise, not triumph. Just the satisfaction of a plan that took 20 years and arrived exactly where it was supposed to. Eleanor turned a page, then another. I sat at the table and watched them read. I am an editor. I have spent my career reading other people's stories. I know when a manuscript is working. The reader's breathing changes. Their posture shifts forward. The world outside the page stops mattering. I had seen it 1,000 times in 1,000 meetings with 1,000 authors. This was the first time I had seen it happen with my name on the spine. The house settled around me the way a good sentence settles on a page. Every word in the right place. Nothing forced, nothing missing. Eleanor had taken the book to her room to finish it. Hannah had gone upstairs with her hand on her stomach and the schedule for tomorrow already adjusted. Victoria had finished her rice and her reading in that order and told me it was good, which from Victoria meant it was very good because she did not compliment things that were merely acceptable. Solomon had gone to bed with a nod that contained more approval than most men put into speeches. I sat alone at the kitchen table. The book was in front of me. I picked it up, felt the weight. I had noticed a long time ago that Clare moved the remote to the left side of the coffee table. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. I am an editor. You learn to see what has been moved. What I did not notice until considerably later was that I had started coming home to a place that was exactly as I had left it, because nobody moved anything without asking, because everybody had their spot. Eleanor in the writing room with her red pen, Hannah in the hallway with her clipboard, Amber at the stove, Norah on the train to Hokkaido, Victoria on the court, Solomon at the head of the table. The story was working. I had been in it the whole time. I just had to reach the last page. I set the book down. I looked at the garden through the dark window. The koi pond was invisible at night, but I knew it was there. I knew that at 9:15 tomorrow morning, the light would hit the water and I would see it from my desk, and I would start the next chapter of whatever I was writing. A year ago, I lay on a couch in a 2-bedroom apartment and stared at the ceiling. The remote was on the wrong side of the coffee table. My wife was gone. My colleague was gone. My dream was in a drawer, and Gerald's voice was the only one I could hear. Now I sat at a kitchen table in a mansion full of people who chose me. 5 women, 1 grandfather, 2 children on the way, a book with my name on it that I had written in the evenings while the house breathed around me. I was happy. I had not said that in a long time. I had not said it when Amber kissed me, or when Solomon shook my hand, or when Hannah organized the world into something I could live in. I had not said it because the word had been taken from me once, and I was not sure I could afford to use it again. But I was sitting at a table in a house full of people who were not going to leave, and the book was real, and the children were coming, and Norah would call on Friday, and Amber would be home by 6. I was happy. I said it to the empty kitchen. I said it the way I said everything that mattered, flat, without qualification, without decoration. A fact. The kind of fact that does not need anyone else in the room to hear it, because it is true whether or not someone is listening. The story was working. It had been working for a long time. I just had not let myself notice.